none of us want to put new money to work in New York until it gets resolved, because it's not just the governor's words about behavior, which none of us understand. I don't understand what you said there. It wasn't comforting to me. I'm just one investor. But I'm very concerned about the next step of seizing assets. Capital comes to America because of the stability of the justice system. And this is not stable in terms of many people's eyes, domestically and internationally. Seizing assets is what happens in Venezuela. It doesn't happen in New York. And so this is a little scary.
And of course, we heard Letitia James say it. She said it very clearly. If Trump can't come up with the $400 million, we'll just start seizing his assets. So you just heard Kathy Hochul say, look, this is an extenuating situation. This is an extraordinary situation just based on Trump. But look, let's be clear. They hate Trump. They can't stand the guy. It's a deep hatred for Trump. They want to stop him from becoming president again, and they're going to stoop to whatever levels it takes. That's basically what she just told you. So I don't know if you're ever going to get in their ire. I mean, if you become the person that they hate, maybe you're next. I don't know.
Well, that's why I'm worried about it.
I mean, it is a horrible, horrible look for the Department of Justice if it gets that far. And so there is a potential, of course, that, trials are not linear, as we're seeing now. Trial schedules are not linear. There is a potential that this goes past the general election. And then if Trump wins, then there might not be a prosecution at all.
Okay, so if the Supreme Court rules against former President Trump and decides that he can be tried, then what? Can you play out the scenarios here, best and worst case for the former president?
Right. If they do decide, basically, if the Supreme Court takes this up, which it's going to, and says, you know what, we agree with the two lower courts who ruled on this, there is no blanket presidential criminal immunity, then Trump is in no different a position than he is now. Then basically this all just gets put back on the trial calendar, and then you could potentially see a trial right in the middle of election season. Now, if Biden wins, then, the general election, then that trial will proceed if there is no presidential immunity. But like I said, if Biden loses and Trump is the president, the DOJ is not going to prosecute a sitting president. And also, it'll then be Trump's DOJ. And we don't know what happens to the prosecution in that case. It might just completely fall apart. Well, it's pretty unbelievable that this almost seems like a little bit of a political stunt.
And I'm sad about this because my kids live in New York. I want New York to be successful. I'm sick about this.
Yeah, well, a lot of people want New York to be successful. Me too, but that doesn't mean I'm going to stay there if this kind of behavior continues.
You want to think about the people who did business with Donald Trump. They made money off of those interactions. Not just average consumers, but financial institutions. So for her to bring this case, I think is a legal and unconstitutional violation. And when that's overturned on appeal, she's now talking about seizing Trump's residences and real estate properties. I want to know what property of Letitia James is going to be seized when this is overturned on appeal for the damage this is doing to our country and to trust in the standard of the rule of law in the United States of America. We need accountability when this is overturned on appeal. But for now, I'll say this is a travesty of justice, and this should not happen in the United States of America.
Legal hits keep on coming for Donald Trump, and the world is waking up to the full banana republic nature of the judgment handed down against the former president in New York City last week.
The corrupt persecution by this regime will not stop with me. Oh, it's not going to stop with me. I mean, they gave me a fine of $355 million for doing nothing wrong. This was a fine like never seen before. And the amazing thing, the republic, the people in this country, they understood it immediately. It's all a big hoax. If I wasn't running, I wouldn't have been sued. None of these indictments would happen.
How much is this just the Democrats utterly weaponizing the justice system to punish Donald Trump?
Well, it's unparalleled and unprecedented. This statute has never been used in this way in the history of the state of New York. No comparable statute has been used in this way in the entire country. No case like this has ever been pursued against a leading political opponent of the presidential candidate, or anybody for that matter.
I've been indicted more than some of the greatest criminals in the world for nothing. For nothing. If my plane flies over a blue state, that evening I get a subpoena to report to a federal judge.
So we are in unparalleled waters. And consequently, what we're witnessing is we're seeing a lot of blowback from the business community, the real estate community, the investment community, saying that they will not do business in New York as long as cases like this are even capable. Because here, this is extraordinary because there was simply no victim. The only alleged victim, the banks, testified on behalf of President Trump, said that they would not only do the deal again, they were glad they did it the first time. That it was an extraordinarily profitable deal for them to even be in business with Trump, but of course Trump paid back every penny, nickel, dime, and dollar.
Last week, former President Trump was slapped with a $354 million judgment, plus interest that compounds every day in his civil fraud case in New York. The case brought by State Attorney General Letitia James. In an interview with ABC News, James warning Trump to pay up.
We are prepared to make sure that the judgment is paid to New Yorkers.
Can you explain that to me? What has happened to this great constitutional republic that is supposed to be, governed by equal justice under the law and equal application of our laws? Every American should fear this regardless of where they stand politically. That's what I believe.
This isn't the American dream. This is the American nightmare. And this is not even about Donald Trump. It's about every other American at home who's now at risk of prosecutorial abuse as well. I think one of the great things that happened for this country was in the last week, seeing Fani Willis actually testify in that case, Sean. There, the American public was able to see bare. These are the people who are actually pursuing these cases against Donald Trump. People have no idea about basic geography or the basic idea or the understanding of the law as well. These are not the people that our founding fathers envisioned should be in charge of, let alone prosecuting a former president of the United States and somebody who's running for president of the United States. They're rolling over in their graves. We're supposed to be a country where, regardless of your skin color, and yes, regardless of your political belief, there is one standard of the rule of law in the United States of America. And I'm grateful that Donald Trump is standing strong, that he's actually said it beautifully the other night. Actually, on Fox, on the town hall, he said it. You know what my vengeance will be? Success will be my vengeance. There's a trap to try to bait somebody, to come after them in so many different directions that you get them to crumble or to make a mistake. I'm glad to see him going in the other direction to say that, you know what, we're going to chase success. Success is unifying. Success is how we win. And you know what? I have full confidence that that's exactly what's going to happen this November, even though they've created a complicated path to get there.
The Attorney General saying if Trump does not have the money to pay off his judgment, she will go after some of his real estate properties, including the skyscraper at 40 Wall Street.
I look at 40 Wall Street each and every day, and we will ask the judge to seize his assets.
She will not succeed in that effort.
Commercial litigation and bankruptcy lawyer Leo Jacobs says A.G. James has to get in a long line of others before she might ever see a dime from Trump's property.
Number one is the other lien holders, equity holders, judgment lien holders, taxes, New York City, New York State. The list goes on and on and on.
Which he says would take years. And as has been reported many times, Trump does not own every building bearing his name. Trump is known for licensing his name to other developers. And circling back to his recent civil fraud trial in New York, Trump has denied any wrongdoing and says he will appeal.
And now you have a court trying to limit his ability to challenge this at the appellate level by requiring he post bond of the full amount pending appeal, but that he do so in a manner that does not take into consideration the full value of his properties, or by borrowing from someone else, or by operating in New York. And so this is extraordinary. We haven't seen anything like this. Frankly, we haven't seen anything like this in the whole world in a long time. And that's why it's so terrifying.
And Robert, this is the thing that really concerns me, and this is what I always tell people. You know, it shouldn't matter whether or not you like Trump or think he's the worst human being ever to live. The fact of the matter is, today they're going after Donald Trump using the law. Tomorrow it could be some other person or somebody else who doesn't toe the line in whatever the kind of political regime of the day.
You're going to see businesses fleeing New York.
Right.
New York has become a legal banana republic.
Congratulations. Are you happy with the investment? They're all gone.
Well, some of President Trump's supporters are pushing back against what they see as an unfair justice system, threatening a boycott that could have a major impact on the country's largest city.
Heard that there were going to be 700,000 truck drivers protesting.
They work hard, they work long. Nobody works harder, actually. I know a lot about trucking, I know a lot about truckers, and I know plenty of truckers. They're great people.
Ridiculous claims, and ultimately the judgment is untethered to any number. There was no victim, no bank was lost any money, no insurance company was out anything. And so, this judge just picked a number out of the air, hoping to punish Trump, the Trump organizations, the Trump children, and others in the Trump organization. And I think it just is, it's disappointing. But, the other thing that's going to happen here, Rachel, is you're going to see businesses fleeing New York.
Right.
Just like Elon Musk left Delaware, you're going to see these businesses leave.
Well, the truckers in New York, where he was sued this time, have decided, well, we're with Trump, so we're not bringing any goods to New York anymore. Stuff you guys.
What was wild to me, though, is that, you've got all these New York liberals cheering, going, yeah, we got Trump, but, having been in New York about 6 months ago, I can tell you the economy doesn't need this sort of chasing out of successful businesses. People I talk to are saying that it's a witch hunt, and in New York, people are now saying, I'm not sure I want to go and invest in a place like this. Just have a listen to this guy.
New York was already a loser state. Like California is a loser state. There are many loser states because of policy, high taxes, uncompetitive regulation. It was already on the top of the list of being a loser state. I would never invest in New York now, and I'm not the only person saying that.
Why should I do business
because
here
now
when
you-
there are so many more
no
business-friendly
travelers
states that I could do
sending
business
stuff
in
and
Florida,
New
in
York.
Texas, for example. We've seen
Of
Elon
course,
Musk
if
make
you
that historic
boycott
move.
those
So
stuff,
I think people are looking at New York and saying, unless you do something to change the
New
vibe here,
York's
to
the
turn this
business
environment
gonna be a
around,
little worse.
not for me.
This strikes me as just a complete own goal here for New York, that they're going to chase competitive businesses even further out of their high taxing, high regulation jurisdiction, just so they can say, hey, we're the guys who got Trump.
That's precisely what's going to happen. Conservative estimates is that this case is going to cost the state of New York $10 billion or more in direct investment over the next 10 years. Because New York's one of its principal areas of investment is real estate. And now you've taken one of its most successful, one of its most prominent people, a person who helped revitalize New York real estate. Downtown New York was not a place to invest until Donald Trump was able to convert certain buildings into successful properties that attracted investment worldwide, all over the world. And if you're anywhere in the world, do you want to risk your money or your assets in a legal system that could steal all of your property, deny you a right to appeal based on nobody suffering any harm of any kind? Nobody wants to do that. I mean, what made America a great place for the whole world to invest was the stability and reliability and transparency and impartiality of our legal system. And they've jeopardized all of it in the name of getting rid of Trump. And by trying to hurt Trump, all they've really done is hurt New York, hurt America, hurt the credibility of our legal system.
Why would we go to New York? Why take the risk? My only point is, did we just diminish the great state of New York and the great people of New York? And shouldn't they ask for better management so they don't become a flyover state? Remember, New York has the highest taxes in the country, the worst regulatory environment, and it's incredibly mismanaged. And I'm pointing out now, on top of that, you get this insanity, a victimless crime. And forget about Trump. It's not about Trump. I don't care about Trump in this. I care about America, and I care about entrepreneurship, and I care about democracy and the fairness. The judicial system is now being criticized. People are asking themselves, the bar of New York, is this judge rational to charge $355 million in a case where no one lost any money? Is that good for the people of New York? Should the people of New York wake up to this and say, what's happening to us? Why is this becoming so perverse? Why are we the focus of this injustice? And I had nothing to do with Trump. I'm not supporting Trump. I'm supporting American entrepreneurship. And New York is slowly becoming the #1 loser state in America. I'm sorry, that's what's happening. I want to put up my hand and ask, Governor, who's next? Who are you going after next?
You want
Please
your
tell
hand
us.
up for that, Kevin? Put your hand
I
down
wanna
if that's
know.
the question.
Who's
What do you
next?
mean?
Every entrepreneur in New York is saying, am I next? Who's next? Let's penalize all the developers all across America. They've all done the same thing. All of them should go to jail, and we should stop building buildings. That's what the message is from New York. Even the governor herself is concerned about what this looks like to investors all around the world. It's not just U.S. domestic. All around the world, people are talking about what happened here.
Thank you very much.
This is getting wild because Texas is still trucking illegal aliens into New York like it's a thriving business. The truckers are like, well, we're not bringing goods anymore. So you've got no goods coming in via these truckers, and you've got piles of illegal immigrants just still like, hey, you guys vote Dem here. You love this kind of thing. You're a sanctuary city. On you go then. More migrants for you. It's creating the most volatile situation right under our nose.
New York was already a loser state. I would never invest in New York now, and I'm not the only person saying that. I have to syndicate that debt and all that equity. We're talking billions of dollars here. Do you think any foreign institution or any private equity firm or any pension fund would touch New York? No. And that's why New Yorkers should be concerned. The fine people of New York should ask themselves, why are we such a loser state? How are we going to attract business? It's not just the existing businesses that are fleeing out to Texas and Florida. What about new money like this that I'm talking about, like a $4 billion data center? Not a chance I would put that in New York. Zero probability, never. And so they've got a lot of work to do to find themselves getting out of this situation. Winner states versus loser states. Look at Tennessee right now, fastest growing city in America, Nashville. Winner state, good policy, competitive taxes. You've got to start thinking about this in the context of winners and losers. New York mega loser state.
Very high
New York has become a legal banana republic.
about the 12%.
But before I even arrive at the Oval Office, I will win the presidency. I will be doing things that will be amazing.
Why should I do business here when there are so many more business-friendly states that I could do business? In Florida, in Texas, for example. We've seen Elon Musk make that historic move. So I think people are looking at New York and saying, unless you do something to change the vibe here, to turn this environment around, not for me.
Truckers for Trump is trending right now.
Heard that there were going to be 700,000 truck drivers protesting.
3.5 million drivers employed in 2022. That sounds about right to you?
That's correct.
Somewhere in there. Okay. I look at that number. That's a big number, Craig. And we deal with politics here in this town and on this show. Do you have a sense from within your industry? Because I know this Truckers for Trump is trending right now.
Some truck drivers say they're planning on refusing shipments to and from New York City in protest of that.
It's a sad thing. It's a sad day for New York. They really do. Look, I love this city and I love this state.
Well, some of President Trump's supporters are pushing back against what they see as an unfair justice system, threatening a boycott that could have a major impact on the country's largest city. Some truck drivers say they're planning on refusing shipments to and from New York City.
Some of these truckers saying, you know what? We're not going into New York because of what happened to Donald Trump. If I'm just anybody living in New York and I see that headline, and you hear what that woman said off the top of the show, should they be concerned?
Dre,
what could this boycott do to prices, not just in New York, but for all of us across the country?
Well, certainly if truck drivers were to boycott New York City, the impact has the potential to be very damaging and very quickly. We're talking about supermarkets, big box stores, and other businesses that rely heavily on trucking. They would feel the pinch, and so would their customers. About 90% of communities here in New York City rely heavily on trucking to move their goods. This morning, we're on the Jersey side of the George Washington Bridge, and every day you can see hundreds, if not thousands of trucks crossing the bridge from Jersey into the city. Meanwhile, one man is now telling truck drivers not to come to New York City after former President Trump was hit with that massive multi-million-dollar fine last week.
I've been on the radio talking to drivers for about the last hour 15 minutes. And I'm talking to at least 10 drivers going the other way. I'm heading down from South Wisconsin. And
They're going to start refusing loads in New York City starting on Monday.
Yeah, the man calls himself Chicago Ray, and as of last night, his post on X, formerly Twitter, had garnered more than 6 million views and 60,000 likes. Former President Trump also caught wind of what Chicago Ray is doing and reposted Ray's video on his platform Truth Social. But it's hard to ascertain exactly how many drivers are answering his call and what kind of impact it may have. It's not an organized effort, and the drivers expressing support for Chicago Ray, they're scattered all across the country. We did reach out to the Teamsters Union, the union representing many truck drivers, but did not get a response. We also contacted and tried to call at least the National Supermarket Association, which is based here in New York City, but did not get a response. Meanwhile, Chicago Ray says he and other truckers are irate over Judge Arthur Engoron's fining former President Trump more than $355 million for fraud. Ray, like the former president, believes it's a form of election interference. Meanwhile, we talked to one driver who says she's joining the movement to boycott New York City, and she says if things go as planned, the city could pay a big price.
How do you think Trump's fine impacts investors and businesses in New York?
It's not
Well,
Trump's
developers are all
fault. It
asking the
is
same
those
question. Is
ridiculous
this fine
radical
penalty and
left
interest
It's a
commensurate
huge
with,
fine for
the-
no
the
reason.
act, the crime,
It's
so
called
to
pay
speak,
crime.
because,
Pay Trump
remember, there's
being
no
too
money's
fat
lost.
and
There's no
too
victim
white
here.
and
So
too rich.
essentially just under $500 million fine for a situation where no monies were lost. We're just wondering, does this
And the
make
Trump is
sense?
not
And
fat.
asking
He's
ourselves,
strong.
how long
He
will it
just have
take
a
to
big
the
belly.
appellate court to bring it down to what a reasonable number might be? I have no idea what that is. But in the meantime, while this is going through the system, none of us want to put new money to work in New York until it gets resolved.
Chair has a recommendation for your reading pleasure on the subject of antitrust. Senator
As Senator Klobuchar would say, channeling Taylor Swift, I know that all too well.
Thank you for bringing up the Ticketmaster hearing that Senator Lee and I conduct. I'm sure we will have follow-up in writing, or maybe Senator Lee could ask a question about that. Thank you.
I can't match all of Senator Lee's quips on this one, but I'm pretty familiar with Taylor Swift, so I'll do my best.
Now you've got us started. Senator Cornyn?
Attorney General Garland, you of course served in the judiciary for many years, and before you became Attorney General, let me just ask, do you prefer to be called General Garland or Judge Garland?
The senators of this committee can call me anything that they want.
Well, we will with all appropriate respect.
I appreciate that part.
Are you familiar with the strategy of the transnational criminal organizations that are flooding migrants across the border, overwhelming Border Patrol and other law enforcement authorities so that then the drug traffickers can move illicit drugs across the border? Are you familiar with that, what I would call a business model?
I am, and I set up, specifically directed the establishment of a task force on anti-smuggling and anti-human trafficking for just the reason you said. It involves our Civil Rights Division, our Criminal Division, and the U.S. Attorney's offices all along the border, as well as our offices in the Northern Triangle countries and Mexico.
I think you and I had this conversation earlier, maybe at your confirmation hearing, but I think the Attorney General has the toughest job in government, I believe, because you have to wear two hats. You are the chief law enforcement officer of the country, and you are also a political appointee and a member of President Biden's cabinet. But I think you also told us at the hearing, your confirmation hearing, you repeatedly said that the executive branch cannot simply decide based on policy disagreements that it will not enforce the law. Is that still your position?
Yes, it is, Senator.
On September the 11th, 2001, we lost about 3,000 Americans to a terrorist attack. We declared a war on terror. The Congress issued an authorization for the use of military force. If you took the size of an average 737 or passenger jet today, holds between 145 and 185 passengers. If you were to rack up all of the deaths that we've seen as a result of drugs coming across the southwestern border, as a result of this successful business model that the cartels have employed, you would be talking about the equivalent of a passenger jet per day crashing, killing everyone on board. I have been just astonished at the lack of sense of urgency to deal with this issue. It seems we've become so desensitized to it that that sense of urgency is simply gone. But I will tell you that it's directly related to the open border policies of the Biden administration, where people continue to come across the border, turn themselves into a broken asylum system, or simply get away from law enforcement because they're overwhelming the Border Patrol's capacity. This is intentional, as you acknowledge. It's a business model of the cartels, and they are getting rich, and students like those parents who I met with last week in Johnson High School in Hays County, Texas, right outside of Austin, are losing their sons and daughters to fentanyl overdoses because of exactly this successful business model by the cartels. I want to ask you a little bit about the prosecution policies of the Garland Attorney General's Department of Justice. Sort of the bedrock standard for prosecuting crimes has historically been that the prosecutor should pursue the most serious, readily provable offense, and that's been the bedrock of policy for over decades. We know that Eric Holder, when he was Attorney General, changed that standard. And specifically, what I want to ask you is about two different memos that you've issued to prosecutors with regard to mandatory minimum sentencing. And specifically, in the charging memo, one of the charging memos, you said the proliferation of provisions carrying mandatory minimum sentences has often caused unwarranted disproportionality in sentencing and disproportionately severe sentences. Now, just to be clear, mandatory minimum sentences are statutory, correct? In other words, they're passed by Congress and signed into law by the president.
Yes, that's right.
And here, you suggest that prosecutors should not enforce or charge defendants with a crime which carries a mandatory minimum under certain circumstances, correct?
I did not, it's not exactly, if I can just have a moment to explain, I'm very familiar.
No, well, if you just answer the question. So, the memo says specifically, I'll just read it to you. It said, for this reason, charges that subject a defendant to a mandatory minimum sentence should ordinarily be reserved for instances in which the remaining charges would not sufficiently reflect the seriousness of the defendant's criminal conduct, danger to the community, harm to victims, or other considerations outlined above. So basically, your charging memorandum says that prosecutors can exercise their discretion to charge less than the most serious offense because you don't like the mandatory minimum sentences that Congress has passed, correct?
No, Senator, this is a question of allocating our resources and focusing them on violent crime. Later on,
I thought you said that your job was to enforce the law without regard to policy differences.
It's not a question of policy differences. It's a question of the resources.
You don't have enough money. You don't have enough people.
We don't have enough money. We don't have enough jails. We don't have enough judges.
Well, you've arrogated to yourself the decision to make policy by saying that in spite of the fact that there are mandatory minimum sentences for many of these drug crimes, which are now causing untold death and destruction across America, you're telling prosecutors don't charge those if they involve a mandatory minimum sentence.
With respect, Senator, the memorandum makes clear that general analysis doesn't apply in violent crime, doesn't apply in drug trafficking, doesn't apply in cases in which there's injury.
So you're cherry picking which cases that you will charge with a mandatory minimum sentence and not applying them uniformly and charging the most serious crime that can be proven at
If we
trial.
apply it to every single crime, we will not be able to focus our resources on violent crime and significant drug trafficking, on the cartels, on the people who are killing people with fentanyl. So the purpose here is to focus the attention of our prosecutors and agents on the things that are damaging the American people in the largest possible respect. That's what what this policy says.
At 108,000 roughly Americans who died as a result of drug overdoses last year, 71,000 roughly of fentanyl overdoses. Do you consider your current policies successful?
As I said, in answer to another question, we have a huge epidemic of fentanyl problem created by intentional acts by the cartels. We are doing everything we can within our resources to fight that. We have our DEA working to prevent transfer of precursors into Mexico, to capture the labs, to extradite the cartel leaders, to arrest them in the United States. We are focusing on fentanyl with enormous urgency. I have personally twice traveled to Mexico to try to get greater cooperation from the Mexicans on exactly the problem you're talking about. I have separately talked twice in person with the Mexican Attorney General for exactly the problem that you're talking about. That we are focusing on this with enormous urgency. This is a priority of the Justice Department, but this is a whole of government problem. The border is a responsibility of the Department of Homeland Security. We do what we can do with respect to the jurisdictions that we have.
Thank you, Senator Cornyn. Senator Blumenthal. Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Attorney General. Thank you for your time today. Listening to the questions and the answers and your responses, what is coming clear to me as I listen to this is basically in your DOJ, there are two tiers of justice. There are one for people with conservative values, for parents, for people of faith. And then there is another tier of justice that applies to the Washington liberal elites, political elites. And what I want to do is dig down a little bit on how you and the department have applied this discretionary form of justice. It's something that concerns Tennesseans, and when I'm across the state, we have 95 counties. I visit each of them every year, and Mr. Attorney General, that comes up quite a bit. Much of it has come up in relation to the Dobbs decision, and the attacks and the violence there has increased from groups on the far left. It has not increased from pro-life groups. And since the Dobbs leak, there have been 70 pro-life pregnancy centers that were targeted. Only 2 of these activists have been indicted. There are 25 individuals that have been indicted under the FACE Act in just 5 months. So you see the disparity there. I appreciate you said that most of these attacks are carried out at night and that the protests take place during the day. So you say it's easier to identify and go after people that are carrying out a peaceful protest during the day rather than a firebombing at night. Is that correct?
If I could just say, I wish you would assure your constituents in all the counties that the Justice Department does not treat people in the way that is described.
Well,
we treat like cases alike. We do not have one view.
Okay, then let's talk about a specific case in Tennessee, the Hope Clinic. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not familiar with it.
Okay, the Hope Clinic for Women is a pregnancy resource center in Nashville. And currently, you have gone out of your way to prosecute 11 individuals in Tennessee under the FACE Act. And Are you aware that this clinic was the subject of an attempted firebombing with a Molotov cocktail?
So we are very concerned about these kind of firebombings, and I agree with you. They're happening around the United States. The FBI has put its resources into this. We are investigating it in every way. We've offered rewards for anyone who has information.
Let's talk about how these groups get classified. When we talked about the way parents of children were treated, and because they were concerned over what was being taught in schools, Senator Kennedy just went through that with you. You applied domestic terrorism as a term in couching that activity. Now, under federal law, which you have cited, this is how you term domestic terrorism, and I'm quoting, activities that involve acts dangerous to human life that are a violation of the criminal laws of the United States or of any state. So under that definition, would you agree that firebombing a crisis pregnancy center constitutes an act of domestic terrorism?
I would say yes, but I want to again disagree with your earlier characterizations. There was no memorandum about parents complaining to their school boards, and there was
about firebombing pregnancy.
I understand, and there was no reference in that memo to using domestic terrorism.
Firebombing.
Where it said yes, firebombing. Where
domestic terrorism.
It's at least domestic violent extremism.
Okay, so then let's talk about the far left group James Revenge, because they claimed responsibility for that. They went so far as to spray paint their name on the wall. So, do you intend to prosecute them?
We intend, if we find them, to do that. There is
so you can't find them.
If you have information about those groups, we would be happy to.
That is your job.
That's right, and we are putting heavy resources into this. We have found a group that's
they're a domestic terrorist organization.
I would say it depends on the people
who took credit for this, spray painted their name on the wall. Let me ask you a couple of questions before my time runs out. We've talked a little bit today about the targeting at the justices' homes. Have you released any type of memorandum that explicitly condemns the acts of intimidation outside of the Supreme Court justices' homes?
I have directly instructed the Marshal Service to send over 70 United States Marshals to prevent acts of violence and threats of violence outside those.
Memo.
I don't need to do a memo because I spoke directly to the Marshals about this topic.
All right. Have you watched any of the footage of the protesters outside the justices' homes?
Unless I caught it on the news, I haven't specifically watched it.
Are you investigating any of those individuals? You said, you investigate protesters because they do their activity in the light of day. And most of the firebombings and things take place at night, but I would think the FBI knows how to investigate crime.
As I explained, our principal responsibility here is to protect the lives of the justices. We've put United States...
But you haven't watched any of that footage.
The United States Marshals are on scene, watching what happens on scene.
Any of those individuals that were protesting at the justices' homes were there for any reason other than to try to intimidate the justices?
The Marshals' job is to protect the lives of the justices, and they will arrest people who they think are threatening the lives of the justices. That's their job.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. I have to say, people in Tennessee talk a lot about their frustration. They want to trust the DOJ. They want to be able to trust their government. They are very concerned about what appears to be, by actions, 2 tiers of justice. And this is something that they do not see as equal treatment under the law. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Senator Blackburn. Senator Welch.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Attorney General. I appreciate the work you've been doing on election infrastructure and security. We have our town meeting in Vermont next week. We're pretty proud of that. You raise your hand. And
Mr. Chairman, Attorney General Garland, let me just ask you, does your department have a problem with anti-Catholic bias?
Our department is protects all religions and all ideologies. It does not have any bias against any religion of any kind.
Well, you could have surprised me, because given the resources that you are expending and the apparently intelligence assets that you are deploying against Catholics, it appears, and other people of faith, while simultaneously turning a blind eye while people are executed gang style on the streets of our cities, including in my home state, your answer frankly surprises me. Let's talk about the Mark Houck case, for example. You've been asked about this already today, and frankly, your answers really astound me. This is a case where a Catholic pro-life demonstrator, father, was accused of disorderly conduct in front of an abortion center. The local prosecutor, the Philadelphia district attorney, who is a Democrat, a liberal, very progressive, declined to prosecute. There was a private suit that got dismissed. And then after all of that, your Justice Department sent between 20 and 30 armed agents in the early morning hours to the Houck's private residence to arrest this guy after he had offered to turn himself in voluntarily. Here's the photo. Once again, you can see the long guns, you can see the ballistic shields, you can see that they're wearing bulletproof vests. Why did the Justice Department do this? Why did you send 20 to 30 SWAT-style agents and a SWAT-style team to this guy's house when everybody else had declined to prosecute and he'd offered to turn himself in?
Determinations of how to make arrests under arrest warrants are made based by the tactical operators in the district.
But you surely looked into it by this point, right? You know the answer, surely.
All I know is what the FBI has said, which was that they made decisions on the ground as to what was safest and easiest. So you do not agree with your description of what happened on the scene.
You don't agree with my description. I'm pointing out what the photo is. There are agents here who have long guns and ballistic shields. Let's take a look at the hardened criminals that your Justice Department sent these armed agents to go terrorize on that morning. Here they are at Mass. Here's the 7 children with Mr. Houck and his wife. In this early morning, they were all at home. Mrs. Houck has said repeatedly the children were screaming. They feared for their lives. You got these agents demanding that he come out. They've got the guns, she said, pointing at the house and at them. He has offered to turn himself in. And this is who you go to terrorize. What's really interesting to me is this seems to directly contradict your own memorandum about the use of force at the Justice Department. You say officers may use only the force that is objectively reasonable to effectively control an incident. Are you telling me that in your opinion as Attorney General, it was objectively necessary to use 20 or 30 SWAT-style agents with long guns and ballistic shields for these people?
What I'm saying is that decisions about how to go about this were made on the ground by FBI agents.
So you're saying you don't know?
I'm saying what I just said.
Which is that you're abdicating responsibility?
I'm not abdicating responsibility.
Then give me the answer. Do you think, in your opinion, you are the Attorney General of the United States? You are in charge of the Justice Department, and yes, sir, you are responsible. Yeah. So give me an answer.
The FBI does not agree with your description.
I'm not asking about the FBI. You are the Attorney General. Give me your answer. Do you think that it was objectively reasonable and they followed your guidelines in sending 20 to 30 armed agents to terrorize these people? Yes or no?
The facts I have, which are those presented by the FBI, are not consistent with your description.
So you think it was reasonable?
I'm saying the facts are not as you described.
What, that the children weren't there? That there weren't long guns there? That there weren't agents? What do you dispute? What's the factual premise you dispute? Be specific.
Said they don't agree with your
But
description.
actually, at 2021, they said police called peaceful police with rifle and a grenade into my own apartment at 2021.
I am aware and we respect the decision of the jury.
Do you know how long it took them?
I don't know.
1 hour. 1 hour. Philadelphia District Attorney declines to prosecute. The private suit's dismissed. You use an unbelievable show of force with guns that I just note liberals usually decry.
We're supposed to hate long guns and assault-style weapons. You're happy to deploy them against Catholics and innocent children. Happy to. And then you haul him into court and a jury acquits him in 1 hour. I just suggest to you that that is a disgraceful performance by your Justice Department and a disgraceful use of resources. I notice a pattern, though. The FBI field office in Richmond on the 23rd of January of this year issued a memorandum in which they advocated for, and I quote, the exploration of new avenues for tripwire and source development against traditionalist Catholics, it's their language, including those who favor the Latin Mass. Attorney General, are you cultivating sources and spies in Latin Mass parishes and other Catholic parishes around the country?
The Justice Department does not do that. It does not do investigations based on
But
religion.
that's why
I saw the
2021,
documents.
there's a
It's
rifle
appalling. It's
for
appalling.
policemen.
Complete agreement
They
with
call
you.
themselves
I
peaceful
understand that the
police.
FBI has
Peace
withdrawn
police.
it, and it's now
They come
looking
to
to
my
help
apartment
that
with
might
rifle and a
That's
grenade
what they're looking
and
into.
arrest
I'm
me into
totally in
mental
agreement with you. That
illness
document was appalling.
hospital.
I'll tell you how it happened. This memorandum, which is supposed to be intelligent, cites extensively the Southern Poverty Law Center, which goes on to identify all of these different Catholics as being part of hate groups. Is this how the FBI, under your direction and leadership, is this how they do their intelligence work? They look at left-wing advocacy groups to target Catholics? Is this what's going on? I mean, clearly it is. How is this happening?
The FBI is not targeting Catholics, and as I've said, this is an inappropriate
They're
memorandum.
talking both
It doesn't
Catholic
reflect
and
the
a
message that
Christian.
God is supposed to be
I'm
using.
Christian,
Should
so
not
they
be
send
relying on any
four
single
soldiers
organization
with
to
a rifle and a
Let me
grenade.
just ask you, as my time expires here, a very direct question. How many informants do you have in Catholic churches across America?
I don't know, and I don't believe we have any informants aimed at Catholic churches. We have a rule against investigations based on First Amendment activity, and Catholic churches are obviously First Amendment activity.
Well,
but I don't know the specific answer to the
You,
question.
you don't know the specifics of anything, it seems, but apparently on your watch, this Justice Department is targeting Catholics, targeting people of faith, specifically for their faith views. And Mr. Attorney General, I'll just say to you, it's a disgrace.
General, I want to explore the dangerous crisis at our southern border and your role in causing that crisis. Asylum traditionally is reserved for people who face things like religious persecution, persecution for their political beliefs, or violence because of their race or ethnicity. In June of 2021, you changed the department's asylum rules so that it could apply to individuals with significant gang violence in their home country. Is that 2021 interpretation
And
still in
when
place?
there's anti-Semitic Islamic protest with violence, how come FBI don't stop
murder
that?
rate in Honduras?
I'm sure it's enormously high.
It's 36 per 100,000 people. What about Colombia?
I don't know.
23 per 100,000. Guatemala?
Again, I don't know, but I believe it's quite high.
17 per 100,000. What about Mexico, right across our southern border?
I also think it's very high.
28 per 100,000. So I have to say, since you rewrote the rules of asylum based on the perceived degree of violence in these countries, I'm a little surprised you didn't know those, but let's look a little bit closer to home. Do you know the murder rate in New Orleans last year?
I don't, but I want to be clear, this wasn't based on violence. This is based on threats specifically to individuals, on gangs, where the country was unable to protect the person. That's what it was about. It wasn't about violence in
Well,
general.
okay, well, you're partly responsible for protecting Americans. So let's see, Honduras' government can protect its own people, except for 36 out of every 100,000 for murders. Guatemala, 17 out of every 100,000. The murder rate in New Orleans last year was 70 for every 100,000. What about St. Louis?
Again, very high. I think.
68 per 100,000. What about Baltimore?
Also very
58
high.
per 100,000. Should American citizens in places like New Orleans and Baltimore and St. Louis begin to seek asylum in countries like Honduras and Guatemala under your asylum principles?
Again, I'm saying that the principle here is protection of specific individuals who are being threatened by the gang, and where the local country is unwilling or unable to protect them.
So is the United States government and the city governments of St. Louis and Baltimore and New Orleans unwilling or unable to protect its own citizens?
I don't believe they're unwilling. They're doing everything that they can. We're supporting them in every way they can. The examples that you're talking about are ones where they are unwilling to protect from gangs.
So, Mr. Attorney General, one of the reasons we have a crisis at our border where we have illegal aliens running to our border patrol, not away from our border patrol, is this interpretation of asylum. That anyone, anywhere who lives in a dangerous or poor country can come here and seek asylum, as opposed to seeking it, as is traditionally the case, for things like persecution on religious belief or political practice. But let's move on. Let's move on, Mr. Attorney General.
That's not the standard. I want to be clear.
Again, welcome, Attorney General. I'm going to do something maybe a bit different. I'm going to try to find consensus where we can, see how far we go. Do you agree that the Wagner organization associated with Russia should be a foreign terrorist organization under U.S. law?
I think they are an organization that's committing war crimes, an organization that's damaging the United States. I think they've already been designated as a
criminal, yes.
TCO. I'm trying to get that.
I want to go up a notch. Are you okay with that?
I understand. This is the way in which determinations are made with respect to terrorist organizations come through the State Department. They have to make determinations of what the consequence is for countries that have them in them.
Do you object to me trying to make them a foreign terrorist?
I think I don't object. I think though that I would defer in the end to the State Department on this.
Yeah. Well, I bet we'll all come together on that one. Fentanyl deaths are more than gun and accident deaths combined in the United States. Did you know that?
Yes, sir.
I mean, how would you describe the fentanyl problem in America?
It's a horrible epidemic, but it's an epidemic that's been unleashed on purpose by the Sinaloa and the New Generation Jalisco cartels.
Let's just stop and absorb that for a moment. It's a horrible epidemic. It kills more people than car wrecks and gun violence combined. And the question is, what are we going to do about it? Under current law, fentanyl loses its Schedule I status by the end of the year. You oppose that, I assume?
I certainly do. All fentanyl-related drugs should be scheduled.
Do you support mandatory minimums for people dealing in fentanyl?
I think we already have mandatory minimums for people.
Do you think this should be increased?
I think we have more than enough ability now to attack this problem.
Well, would you agree with me? Whatever we have is not working.
Well,
whatever we're doing is not working.
I agree with that because of the number of deaths that you pointed out. So
just keep an open mind that what we got on the books is not working. If somebody gave a pill to another person with arsenic or ricin, could they be charged for murder because that will kill you?
Absolutely.
Okay, if somebody gave a candy-shaped pill full of fentanyl, could they be charged for murder?
Well, they can be charged with drug trafficking leading to death. I don't think the statute says murder, but it does say specifically aims at that. We have brought prosecutions. I know, having discussed this with the U.S. Attorney in Colorado and the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York.
So Senator Cotton's got a proposal to dramatically increase the penalties associated with fentanyl. I'd like to work with you and the chairman, if we could, to find a bipartisan solution to this problem to create deterrence that doesn't exist. Mexican drug cartels, should they be designated foreign terrorist organizations under U.S. law?
Yeah, I think it's the same answer I gave before. They are already designated in any number of ways and sanctioned by the Treasury.
Would you oppose some of us trying to make them foreign terrorist organizations?
I wouldn't oppose it, but again, I want to point out there are diplomatic concerns. We need the assistance of Mexico in this and designating.
Is Mexico helping us effectively with our fentanyl?
They are helping us, but they could do much more. There's no question about that.
Well, if this is helping, I would hate to see what not helping looks like. Well, so the bottom line for me is they're not helping, and we need to up our game when it comes
National
to
Harbor
Gitmo. You're familiar with the Gitmo
gas station selling those swab masks and flag in our strip flag in National Harbor was missing at least 4 days already.
Hostilities.
Yes, that's a law both of the circuit I was on before and the Supreme Court.
Right. So do you agree with me that ISIS and Al Qaeda is still at war with us?
Yes, I do.
So you agree that anybody associated with these organizations could be held indefinitely if they present a risk to the American people?
I think they could. I think that the determination of whether they present a risk and how they should be dealt with is a determination to be made by the Defense Department, and the Defense Department is
But
making.
legally, they can be held as long as they're a risk, and that could be for the rest of their lives, correct?
I think that's right. It obviously depends on the facts of the determination.
Totally agree. Do you believe Russia's committing crimes against humanity?
I do.
Okay, that's a pretty bold statement. Should we create an international court to support charges of crime of aggression? Do you support that idea?
So the United States supports what is now being developed in The Hague, sponsored by Eurojust, looking into the possibility of creating that court. There are concerns that we have to take into account with respect to how that might deal with our own service members and other circumstances. We have to be sure that the appropriate guardrails are up, but we support any number of different ways in which war crimes, crimes against humanity, and the potential for crimes against aggression are investigated.
I'd like to work with you in that regard. I think that's something we could do.
I would be happy to.
When it comes to federal prisons, are you aware that 1,200 prisoners are requesting to be sent from a male prison to a female prison?
I'm not, no.
Okay. What is our policy when it comes to allowing a male prisoner to be transitioned into a female prison?
I think if you're generally asking the question of how trans people are dealt with in the Bureau of Prisons, my understanding is that these are determinations about where they're placed or where people are placed in general, have to do with individualized determinations regarding the security of that individual and the management of the prison. These are done on a case-by-case basis. That's my understanding.
Are you aware of any policy guidelines that they use to make that determination?
I think there is a policy guideline along the lines that I just said, that they are.
I would like for the Bureau of Prisons to send it to us. Are you concerned that if a biological male is sent to a female prison, that could be a risk to female prisoners?
I think every person in prison has to be dealt with dignity and respect. That determinations of the safety questions you're talking about have to be made on an individualized basis and not categorically.
Finally, let's end where we started, fentanyl. If this drug is killing more Americans than car wrecks and gun violence combined, do you believe that the policies we have today in effect are working?
I've been involved in the problem of drug crime and drug trafficking for more than 40 years, including...
That's not my question. It's not how long you've been involved. Are they working?
They are not stopping fentanyl from killing Americans, if that's the question you're asking.
You say they're woefully inadequate to the task.
We are putting all the resources that Congress provides to us into doing this. The DEA is doing... we are starting at the precursor level when precursors are sent from China to Mexico. We are then working on attacking the labs.
My time is up. Mr. Attorney, they're not working. And we're going to help you if you'll work with us to give you more tools. I hope you will meet us in the middle. Thank you.
Happy to have more tools, Senator.
Before recognizing another colleague, I want to apologize, and I reference Senator Coons, Senator Cotton.
Mr. Attorney General, I want to explore the dangerous crisis at our southern border and your role in causing that crisis. Asylum traditionally is reserved for people who face things like religious persecution, persecution for their political beliefs, or violence because of their race or ethnicity. In June of 2021, you changed the department's asylum rules so that it could apply to individuals with significant gang violence in their home country. Is that 2021 interpretation still in place?
It is. It reinstates a previous interpretation the department had of the same asylum rules, yes.
Okay. Do you know the most recent murder rate in Honduras?
I'm sure it's enormously high.
It's 36 per 100,000 people. What about Colombia?
I don't know.
23 per 100,000. Guatemala?
Again, I don't know, but I believe it's quite high.
17 per 100,000. What about Mexico, right across our southern border?
I also think it's very high.
28 per 100,000. So I have to say, since you rewrote the rules of asylum based on the perceived degree of violence in these countries, I'm a little surprised you didn't know those, but let's look a little bit closer to home. Do you know the murder rate in New Orleans last year?
I don't, but I want to be clear, this wasn't based on violence. This is based on threats specifically to individuals, on gangs. where the country was unable to protect the person. That's what it was about. It wasn't about violence. in
Well,
general.
okay, well, you're partly responsible for protecting Americans, so let's see, Honduras' government can protect its own people except for 36 out of every 100,000 for murders. Guatemala, 17 out of every 100,000. The murder rate in New Orleans last year was 70 for every 100,000. What about St. Louis?
Again, very high. I think.
68 per 100,000. What about Baltimore?
Also very
58
high.
per 100,000. Should American citizens in places like New Orleans and Baltimore and St. Louis begin to seek asylum in countries like Honduras and Guatemala under your asylum principles?
Again, I'm saying that the principle here is protection of specific individuals who are being threatened by the gang and where the local country is unwilling or unable to protect them.
So is the United States government and the city governments of St. Louis and Baltimore and New Orleans unwilling or unable to protect its own citizens?
I don't believe they're unwilling. They're doing everything that they can. We're supporting them in every way they can. The examples that you're talking about are ones where they are unwilling to protect from gangs.
So, Mr. Attorney General, one of the reasons we have a crisis at our border where we have illegal aliens running to our border patrol, not away from our border patrol, is this interpretation of asylum. That anyone, anywhere who lives in a dangerous or poor country can come here and seek asylum, as opposed to seeking it, as is traditionally the case for things like persecution on religious belief or political practice. But let's move on. Let's move on, Mr. Attorney General.
But that's not the standard. I want to be clear.
I want to come back to a question that Senator Cornyn started. Your unprecedented memo in December of 2020 to direct your prosecutors not to pursue the most serious, readily provable offense. I have gotten numerous contacts in my office from your prosecutors who are shocked that you have overturned this decades-long bipartisan standard. You said this was about allocating resources. What resources are you talking about?
No prosecutor was directed to not bring a case again. In fact,
your memo specifically says that if they feel that it's not warranted, or only if the other offenses are not sufficient, they should not pursue what has been the standard for decades, generations of U.S. attorneys and their assistants.
I'm well aware of the standard because I helped write the standard originally.
Because it was a Carter administration standard.
That's
not
right.
Specifically known for being tough on crime.
Well, it was the first time the principles of prosecution were reduced to a book which explained what they were. It was included in it. Every assistant U.S. attorney is able to use their discretion to bring these kinds of cases. No one's being directed to not do anything.
You specifically said that they should not pursue the most serious, readily provable offenses in cases where mandatory minimums are present because it's not warranted. You specifically said that.
But I said...
What does mandatory mean?
I'm trying to say that...
Does it mean that prosecutors get a choice not to pursue it if we write the law in that way?
The memorandum said that cases of violent crime, which is specifically what you're asking me, are ones where, in fact, it's most likely that they should be bringing the highest and mandatory minimums.
Is it your assertion here that drug trafficking is not a violent crime?
No,
it's built on an entire foundation and edifice of violence.
Yes, and it includes an exception in the same memorandum we're talking about for significant drug trafficking as well as for violent crime. That's right.
Let's get your specific answer. I wrote it down here. I was so surprised by it. You said to Senator Cornyn, this is about allocating resources. Yeah. What resources are we allocating? If one of your assistant U.S. attorneys has some criminal lowlife who could be charged with 12 offenses, but they don't charge the two most serious, readily provable offenses because of your memorandum, they're still charged with 10 offenses. They have to go to a grand jury. They have to go to trial. They have to have a pre-sentencing report. They have to have a sentencing hearing. How is that conserving resources that you don't charge them with the most serious, readily provable offenses that would lock these lowlifes up for the longest time possible?
Lowlifes that you're worried about and have expressed worried about, the large drug traffickers, the violent criminals, they are to be charged to the max.
I ask again, what resources were you talking about? You said to Senator Cornyn specifically it was about allocating resources. What resources?
These include our investigators and how much we have to investigate in order to establish the requirements for mandatory minimums. The prosecutors have to prove those cases, the judges who have to try those cases, and the jails that have to hold those cases, those individuals for longer terms.
I don't see how jails could be a problem. You only have 158,000 prisoners now. 10 years ago, it was 219,000. Do you need more prisons?
Well, I think that...
Kenny's an appropriator. I bet he could get you more
prisons. I think that many of the senators have complained that the jails are too filled, that they're overcrowded, that we're not able to provide the level of protection and security for guards and for prisoners that we would like. But that is not what this is about. Again, I want to be clear. The memorandum was crystal clear that they are to charge this most serious provable offense in cases involving violent crime and drug trafficking.
Okay, let's turn to another example of you overriding Congress's will. Congress has repeatedly decided to impose stiffer penalties for crack cocaine than powder cocaine, done originally at the request of members of the Congressional Black Caucus, voted for by senators like Senator Durbin, the chairman of this committee. 10 years ago, they made change to that. They specifically kept the ratio higher, and they didn't make it retroactive. Now, you have directed your prosecutors, when they are dealing with crack cocaine, to charge it as if it was powder cocaine, something that this Congress has repeatedly refused to do, which we refused to do as recently as December when Senator Booker tried it on the floor and I blocked it. How do you explain overriding Congress's decision on this distinction between crack and powder cocaine to suit your own policy preferences?
The long-standing rule is that the Department of Justice uses its discretion in which charges to bring, regardless of which ones are available, which ones are to bring. Every bit of evidence we have is that there's no difference between powder and crack. Governor Hutchinson testified to that.
Crack is way more
Those are
powerful than
legislative
powder.
decisions. Those are not prosecutorial decisions. If this Congress wants to do it, maybe it will one day. Maybe I'll be outvoted. But those are legislative decisions. Those are not prosecutorial decisions. You said at your confirmation hearing that you had to follow the law as it was written, that the executive branch could not rewrite the law. What you were doing is rewriting the law. It's not a single prosecutor out on the front lines making one decision. You're directing every federal prosecutor to override the law that has been written by Congress.
We're using our discretion as to which charges to bring, in which circumstances, which ones are appropriate. That's what we're doing. That's a long-standing history of prosecutorial discretion in the United States.
Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Attorney General, hello.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, General, for being here. Good afternoon.
Thank you.
I read this somewhere. I don't remember who said it, but I wrote it, but I remember it. It was once observed that a parent who stops loving their children, if a parent stops loving their children, the children will not stop loving the parent. The children will stop loving themselves. I know we can agree that we should encourage parents to be involved in their kids' lives.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure we can agree that we should encourage parents to make their kids do their homework.
Yes, although there's sometimes some resistance to that.
Right. And to make sure they get sleep at night so they can be ready for school.
Yes.
Here's what I've always been confused about. Didn't you understand the chilling effect that it would have to parents when you issued your directive, when you directed your criminal divisions and your counterterrorism divisions to investigate parents who were angry at school boards and administrators during COVID?
Senator, if you just give me a moment to put the full context, I did not do that. I did not issue any memorandum directing the investigation of parents who are concerned about their children. Quite to the contrary, the memorandum that you're talking about says at the very beginning of the memorandum that vigorous public debate is protected by the First Amendment. And the kind of concerns that you're talking about are, as expressed by parents, are of course completely protected. The memorandum was aimed at violence and threats of violence against a whole host of school personnel. It was not aimed at parents making complaints to their school board. And it came in the context of a whole series of other kinds of violent threats and violence against other public officials.
Let's walk through this. Your directive to your criminal division and your counterterrorism division came in a response to a letter from the National School Boards Association, did it not?
in part to the letter and in part to news reports of violence and
And,
offensive violence.
the National School Board Association said these parents ought to be investigated under the Patriot Act as potential domestic terrorists.
And you'll notice, Senator, that I said nothing like
I
that.
understand, but that's what the letter said.
There was a reference to that in the letter, something I disagree with.
And your employees helped them write the letter, didn't they?
I don't know anything to suggest that that's true.
I think it
don't.
is true. And the White House helped them write that letter, didn't they?
I don't know. I have no knowledge about that, but certainly I don't know anything about my employees
And so,
helping write that letter.
So you get this letter from the National School Board Association asking you to investigate parents, and your employees helped write, and the White House helped write, and you issue a directive to your criminal division and to your counterintelligence or counterterrorism division to start investigating parents who are angry. What did you think was going to happen?
Say again, Senator, that nothing in my memorandum says to investigate parents who are angry. Quite the opposite. It says that the First Amendment protects that kind of vigorous debate. The only thing we wanted was for an assessment to be made out in the field about whether federal assistance was needed to prevent violence and threats of violence.
Well, one of your field that's not the way your department implemented your directive. One of your field offices actually opened an investigation. You set up a website and a hotline to report parents. And
I don't think we didn't set up a specific hotline about this. This was a reference to
state
the
Democratic
FBI's hotline.
Party official contacted you. They said that some Republicans were inciting violence by expressing public displeasure with school districts' vaccine mandates. And one of your field offices opened an investigation, which is a permanent part of their record.
Senator, I don't know anything about the specific thing that you're talking about. They used to say in high school this is going to be on your permanent record. I don't believe there is any such thing with respect to this.
I think there is at the FBI, General, and you and I both know there is. There was a lady a mom in Michigan. She has a special needs kid, and the kid was doing pretty well. And she got upset with her local school board over its closures and virtual learning policies, and she went to the meeting, and she made an intemperate comment. She accused them of being a bunch of Nazis. Why would the FBI open an investigation of her?
Again, I don't know anything about the specifics of the case, but accusing people of being Nazis, while I find bad, it's certainly not criminal. It's totally protected by the First
But
Amendment.
the Republican President Crook Joe Biden accused Trump of being Nazi all the time.
This is about the third time I'm being asked about the same memorandum, and each time I've said, and I hope that the senators would go ahead and advise their constituents in the same way, that this is not what we do. We are not in any way trying to interfere with parents making complaints about the education of
But
their
don't
children.
you understand, General, and I believe you, but don't you understand that this looks like you were just giving in to the teachers' unions and politicizing the disagreement, the honest disagreements? I mean, we only, as a result of some of our school board policies, we only experienced the largest learning loss for our kids in modern history. Don't you think parents had a right to be upset?
Absolutely.
Instead of, you implemented, what's a threat tag?
I didn't implement the threat tag. What you're talking about there is a part of internal FBI operations.
Yeah,
And so, as far as I can
directed your folks, though, to open threat tags on these parents and investigate them.
Yeah, I did not direct that. My understanding from testimony by the FBI is that when somebody makes a complaint and it involves, if somebody gives a tip that a school official is being threatened, Then there's, in order to look at trends, they mark it as a tip involving a school official. They have the same set of threat tags with respect to a complaint that suggests somebody is making a threat against a Supreme Court justice. These aren't complaints. These are tips of violence or threats of violence.
A threat tag on a parent for being concerned at a school board meeting?
It's not on the parent. It's not on whoever. It's on to indicate that a threat was made against, or at least alleged that a threat was made against a school board member or a school official or a teacher or a school. Some of these turned out to be bomb threats.
Senator Kennedy, we're going to have a second round of questioning on behalf of Chairman Durbin, who is going to vote. I'm going to call on.
You're blaming it on Durbin. I understand. I apologize for
I
going
take
over.
full responsibility.
Thank you, General.
Just to alert the members, and Senator Cruz is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, welcome. As you know, as I observed at your confirmation hearing, you had built a long record on the Federal Court of Appeals and a reputation of being relatively nonpartisan. And so I had hopes that your tenure as Attorney General would continue that record. I have to say I'm deeply disappointed in what the last 2 years have shown. In my judgment, the Department of Justice has been politicized to the greatest extent I've ever seen in this country. And it has done a discredit to the Department of Justice, to the FBI, and the administration of law in this country. Let me start with a simple question. General Garland, is it a federal crime to protest outside of a judge's home with the intent of influencing that judge as to a pending case?
The answer to that is yes, but I also want to at least respond to your characterization of the department, which I vigorously disagree with. I believe the men and women of the department pursue their work every single day in a nonpartisan and appropriate
General
way.
Garland, there are thousands
But
of men and
when
women
a
who do
judge
that,
is
and I'll tell you, I
threatened
hear from prosecutors at the
how
Department of
could he
Justice. I
make a
hear from
fair
agents of
judgment
the FBI who are
when
angry
his own
that it is
safety,
treated
own house, and
as the
family
enforcement
that
arm of the
is in
DNC
jeopardy.
instead of upholding the law in a fair and even-handed manner. So you are right. There are thousands of men and women that are doing the job, but it is the political leadership that you're responsible for. So you just said, yes, it's a crime to protest at the home of a judge. Same goes for jurors, by the way, with the intent of influencing a case. But in the wake of the leak of the Dobbs decision, when rioters descended on the homes of 6 Supreme Court justices, night after night after night, you did nothing. The department did nothing. When extremist groups like Ruth Sent Us and Jane's Revenge openly organized campaigns of harassment at the homes of justices, you sat on your hands. When these same groups posted online information about where the justices worship, or their home addresses, or where their kids went to school, you again sat on your hands and did nothing.
Their mouths might be
Your failure to act to protect the safety of the justices and their
if they wear
families
masks.
was an obvious product of political bias. You agree with Roe versus Wade, you disagree with the Dobbs decision, and the Department of Justice under this president was perfectly happy to refuse to enforce the law and allow threats of violence. And as you know, those threats finally materialized with Nicholas Roski, a 26-year-old man from California who traveled across the country, was arrested outside the home of Justice Kavanaugh, armed with a handgun, a knife, and burglary tools. And he said he came there to kill Justice Kavanaugh because he was enraged by the leaked opinion. Now, of course, you're prosecuting that individual for attempted murder. But did you bring even a single case to enforce this law, or did the Department of Justice decide this law doesn't apply if it's harassing justices for an opinion we don't like?
When the Dobbs draft was leaked, I did something no Attorney General in the history of the department had ever done before.
Justices for an opinion we don't like.
When the Dobbs draft was leaked, I did something no Attorney General in the history of the department had ever done before. For the first time in history, I ordered United States Marshals 24/7 to defend every residence of every justice.
Well, Garland, as a judge, you're familiar with asking counsel to
I am
answer a question.
I am answering.
Has the Department of Justice enforced this statute? Have you brought a single case against any of these protesters justices under 18 U.S.C. Section 1507? Have you brought even one?
Senator, you asked me whether I sat on my hands, and quite the opposite. I sent 70 United States Marshals.
Let me try again.
To defend. And
Has the Department of Justice brought even a single case under this statute? It's a yes/no question. It's not a give a speech on the other things you did.
The job of the United States Marshals is to defend the lives.
So the answer is no.
Is to defend the lives of the justices. And that's their number one priority. They have.
Why are you unwilling to say no? The answer is no. You know it's no. I know it's no. Everyone in this hearing room knows it's no. You're not willing to answer a question. Have you brought a case under this statute? Yes or no?
As far as I know, we haven't. And what we have done is defended the lives of the justices with over 70 U.S. Marshals.
How do you decide which criminal statutes the DOJ enforces and which one it doesn't?
The United States Marshals know that they have full authority.
Where it is benefit to Democrat Party, they support it.
Statutes you enforce and which ones?
When they violate Republicans' rights, Democrat Party ignore it. Don't even allow the news
Attorney
report.
General make a determination, and you spent 20 years as a judge, and you're perfectly content with justices being afraid for their children's lives, and you did nothing to prosecute it. Let's shift to another area.
Can I answer the question?
You cannot. You have refused to answer the
I am
question.
answering your question. The Attorney General does not decide whether to arrest.
How did you choose not to enforce this statute?
The marshals on scene.
Marshals don't make that decision.
They do make the decision of whether to make an arrest.
Prosecute someone? No, they don't.
If they make
marshals do not have prosecution.
If they make an arrest, then it goes to the marshals.
Let's change topics because our time is limited. We've also seen across the country violent attacks to pregnancy centers by similar left-wing terrorist groups, including one graffiti of a firebomb building said Jane was here. There have been attacks all over the country. And yet, the Department of Justice has not brought these violent criminals to justice. You contrast that. If you're a violent criminal and you attack a crisis pregnancy center, that is not a priority in the Biden Department of Justice. Contrast that to Mark Houck, who's a pro-life activist. He's a sidewalk counselor. And he had an altercation with someone who allegedly interfered with his son's personal space and threatened his son, and he pushed him. Now, in an ordinary world, pushing someone would be maybe a simple misdemeanor assault, but not under the Biden Department of Justice. If you're a pro-life activist, what can you expect? Well, in this instance, according to Mr. Houck's wife, 24 agents clad in body armor and ballistic helmets and shields and a battering ram showed up at his house pointing rifles at his family. Why do you send 24 agents in body armor to arrest a sidewalk counselor who happens to be pro-life, but you don't devote resources to prosecute people who are violently firebombing crisis pregnancies?
It is a priority of the department to prosecute and investigate and find the people who are doing those firebombings. They are doing it at night and in secret. So, and we have found one group which we did prosecute.
You found one. How many have there been? How many attacks?
There have been a lot, and if you have any information specifically as to who those people are, we would be glad to have that.
Authorize 20 agents going to Mr. Houck's house, and he offered to turn himself in through counsel, but you didn't want that. The Department of Justice wanted to make a show of it. Did you personally authorize it? And do you want to apologize to Mrs. Houck and her 7 children for being terrorized?
The decisions about how to do that are made at the level of the FBI agents on scene.
Did you know about it?
I did not know about it until the way you're describing it, and my understanding is the FBI disagrees with that description.
Was it a mistake?
Senator's time has expired. I'm going to allow the witness to respond to any of the questions that were asked.
Was it a mistake?
I'm going to chair the committee, Senator. I'm sorry you're not.
You said you'd allow him to respond. I've repeated the question I asked, which is, was it a mistake to send 20 agents to arrest him at the crack of dawn?
You had your time and more.
You just said you're going to allow him to respond. You just said, I'm going to allow him to respond to the question. So I repeated the question. Was it a mistake? That was the pending question.
When I ask, I'll ask the questions.
That's the question I had already asked.
Well,
you just said you'd let him respond.
I'm going to let him respond right now. Please don't interrupt him. Thank you.
The decisions about how to do tactical arrests are made by the FBI agents in the field. The FBI has publicly stated that it disagrees with the description you gave of what happened in that example. That's the best I can answer.
At this point, we're going to
FBI Director Wray couldn't answer this at the time for reasons that are not his fault, but
I hope you'll say the same thing if I can't answer it.
well, I think the coast is clear now. Michael Sussman, you know who I'm talking about?
He was a defendant in a special counsel prosecution.
Right. He was with the private law firm Perkins Coie, which is the main counsel for the National Democratic Party. He had a special badge to get him into the Justice Department and or the FBI building. Why did he have that special badge?
I'm afraid I also don't know anything about this. I assume from the reference that this is something that Mr. Durham was investigating as part of his investigation.
No, I don't think he investigated the badge.
I know he was investigating Mr. Sussman. This goes back to, I think, 2020.
Right.
But I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, can you find out for me? At the time, the trial was in progress, and Mr. Wray couldn't answer, but the trial's over. And I'd like to know why Mr. Sussman, a private citizen, had a special badge to get him into the FBI and the Department of Justice, and if there are other people out there who have special badges.
Well, on the particular question about Sussman, I think we're going to have to wait until Mr. Durham finishes his report, which should be relatively soon. I certainly don't in any way want to interfere with him, and he's the one who would know the answer to that. On the more general question, I can certainly ask my team to look into how lawyers have special badges.
Would you? That'd be great. Thank you. I want to ask you about the China Initiative, which, as you know, was started under the Department of Justice to counter the transfer of scientific research and intellectual property to China. At any time, did the investigations initiated under the China Initiative by the Department of Justice stem from racism?
I have no evidence to suggest that they did.
Okay. At any time, did the investigations pursuant to the China Initiative and begun by the Department of Justice, were they ever inappropriately undertaken?
Again, I have no evidence to suggest that they did. Obviously, some of the cases resulted in acquittals or dismissals by courts, but that doesn't mean that they were inappropriately begun.
Okay. Did any of the cases that the department initiated under the China Initiative reflect the ancestry of the defendant charged more than the seriousness of the allegations?
I'm not sure exactly what you're asking, but it sounds like it's the same question, and I would give the same answer. I don't have any reason to believe that anything was done inappropriately or based on ancestry or based on discrimination in those cases.
Okay. Do you agree with Chris Wray that China is the biggest threat to U.S. security?
Yeah, and I think the Director of National Intelligence also testified that it's our most dangerous near peer.
Well, let me ask you this, because I've got 11 seconds.
I'm sorry?
I've got 11 seconds left. Why did you get rid of the China Initiative then?
Yeah, so as you know, the new Assistant Attorney General for the National Security Division gave a long description of what was done. This was all folded into one nation-state initiative. We don't know sometimes when there's a cyber attack, when there's another kind of attack, which country is attacking us. And I believe he thought it was most efficient for us to focus our attention on the four main hostile state actors. China, now in many ways affiliating with Russia, which
Some of your people said it was racist.
It is
didn't say
Biden
that.
keep
I don't know who my
fighting
people
trade
are.
war with China,
Well, if I had more time,
and
I
push
would-
China
we could find out
to
here.
like get a close
me out, Senator
relationship with
Manchin.
Russia.
Senator Kennedy, there will be a second round of questions if
Yes,
you would
ma'am.
like to stay.
Yes, ma'am.
Senator Manchin.
There's no way I could fill in for you, sir.
I don't know.
Thank you, Attorney General. On September the 30th, 2023, there was a FOIA request made regarding the ongoing attacks against pro-life organizations. And under federal law, as I understand, federal agencies have 20 working days to respond to FOIA requests. Is that not correct?
Yes, that's the law.
Okay, great. To date, the Department of Justice has not complied with the request, and I have the request in front of me. It was sent to you and to the FBI. It says FOIA communications pertaining to the ongoing attacks against pro-life organizations. And Mr. Chairman, I request unanimous consent to enter this into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. It's been nearly 6 months. Why has the Department of Justice not complied with federal law on this request? I mean, this is a request sent by multiple entities, by Advancing American Freedom, Concerned Women for America, Heritage Action, Family Research Council, all joined together on this FOIA request, and it has gone unanswered. Why?
So again, I obviously don't know that particular request. We get thousands and thousands of FOIA requests, and some take longer to answer than others. This one sounds in part to be asking about ongoing investigations, and of course that requires redaction of information to protect investigations so that the investigations succeed. But I don't know the specifics, and I'll be happy to have my staff get in touch with you.
I would appreciate an answer to this FOIA request. Okay. On that note, there's another FOIA request that was sent by a concerned citizen in Washington, D.C. And that concerned citizen requested access to records concerning data related to the prosecution of homicide, rape, robbery, aggravated assault, burglary, larceny, motor vehicle theft, and arson that occurred in Washington, D.C. in the last 5 years. The response to that request was denied. And it says, the United States Attorney informed you that it does not maintain records such as those that you described. The United States Attorney in Washington, D.C. does not maintain records on the prosecution of violent crime in Washington, D.C. That stuns me.
Again, I don't know the specifics here. Be happy to have staff get back to you. Obviously, some of the statistics only the Metropolitan Police Department has.
I don't mean arrest. I mean prosecution.
I don't know the answer to that question. And I'll be
Okay, can I get your commitment that we can have those records of prosecution of violent crime in D.C.?
You have my commitment that my staff will get in touch with yours and with the U.S. Attorney's Office to find out what the holdup here is.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. One last question for you regarding firearm tracing. In your belief, is every firearm trace that is conducted by ATF linked to an actual crime?
Well, when you say every, always a potential problem. The normal way in which tracing happens is that a police department submits a request based on a gun found at a crime scene. I don't know whether there's something outside of that, but that's typically what happens. State and local police or federal law enforcement gets a gun at a crime scene and then tries to trace back where it was purchased from.
Okay. Last year, Representative Cloud from Texas sent a letter regarding firearm traces, and part of the response to that letter said the NTC only traces crime guns, and every trace must be identified as such by the requester selecting the appropriate crime code. And we requested in a follow-up letter, please provide a list of all the crime codes an agency must choose from when a trace is requested. So far, we've gotten no response to that letter. It's been a year. Will you commit that you will respond to that letter?
Again,
with the crime codes?
I will certainly commit that my staff will get the letter from you, and I will then contact ATF and find out what the holdup is.
Okay, great, because I can personally attest as a federal firearms licensee myself, being the recipient of trace requests. There are multiple traces that have nothing to do with crime whatsoever. Whether it's a gun that was lost, whether it was a gun that was sent back to the manufacturer for repair and we get a trace on it, whether it's a gun that's voluntarily turned into a law enforcement agency for a temporary hold that we get a trace on, or whether a gun was owned by an employee that currently has it and we got a trace on that gun, which I don't understand. So I really don't understand how
two of
tracing
my
process
schools got
works,
robbed.
and I really want to understand
Last year
that.
when I was kidnapped.
Entitled to an explanation, and I'm going to ask the people from ATF to get together with your staff and
Great.
with an explanation.
Thank you very much, and I yield back.
Mr. Morelli?
And what
Thanks so much, Mr. Chair.
my sweet pocket
Attorney
knife.
General,
Total
as my first
one
round
knife,
of-
one knife and two swords.
The second vote has been called for anyone who wants to go vote. I am going to go vote. I'm going to turn the gavel over to Senator Peters, and Senator Britt, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you, Mr. General, for being in front of us today. I appreciate the topics that have been brought up, from drug cartels to Mexico and the DEA to the fentanyl poisoning communities all across this nation to drug use and addiction. I stand ready to be a productive part of those conversations and work to move our nation forward, keeping our communities safe and strong. Mr. General, I want to ask you about some questions when you testified in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee a couple of weeks ago. I am a big believer, and I've heard this all over the state of Alabama as I've traveled. People want justice to be blind. They believe that is a foundational building block of our nation, and until we restore that trust and confidence, people are worried about the direction our nation will go. So you testified several weeks ago before the Senate Judiciary Committee and fielded a number of questions from committee members regarding DOJ's failure to prosecute any individuals who were involved in the illegal protest outside the homes of multiple Supreme Court justices in the aftermath of the leaked Dobbs opinion. As you are well aware, 18 U.S.C. 1507 makes it a crime to picket or parade near a residence occupied by a judge. It says, with the intent of influencing any judge, juror, witness, or court officer in the discharge of his duty. In answering the questions from multiple members of the committee, you repeatedly asserted that DOJ's failure to bring any charges under Section 1507 was due to the fact that the U.S. Marshals who were protecting the homes of the justices failed to make any arrest under that statute. You said, quote, "The marshals have been advised and they know, and the marshals on the ground, they have full authority to arrest people under any federal statute, including that federal statute," end quote. That was in direct reference to Section 1507. You went on to say, "The Attorney General does not decide whether to arrest the marshals on the scene. They do make the decision of whether to arrest." After your appearance before the Judiciary Committee, we obtained copies of the slide deck that was used to train and prepare the marshals for their protective detail at the homes of the justices. Those training materials show that the marshals likely didn't make any arrest under Section 1507 for a pretty simple reason. They were actively discouraged from doing so. As you can see on the slide behind me, the marshals were explicitly told to avoid, unless absolutely necessary, any criminal enforcement action involving the protester. The slides went on to say, they explicitly state that making arrests and initiating prosecutions was not the goal of the marshals' presence at the homes of the justices, and the "not" was actually italicized and underlined. The next slide directs the marshals not to engage in protest-related enforcement actions beyond those that were strictly and immediately necessary and tailored to ensure the physical security of the justices. If you'll see in the next slide here, it discourages the marshals from making arrest under any Section 1507, asserting that there may be a First Amendment right to harass the families of the judges, and by concluding that any arrest of protesters are a last resort to prevent physical harm of the justices. Mr. Attorney General, yes or no, were you at any point before your testimony in front of the Judiciary Committee aware of these training materials or the fact that the marshals have been heavily discouraged from making arrests under Section 1505?
I think this is the first time I've seen the slide deck, and frankly, from here I can't make it out, for which I apologize for my eyesight, but I can't make it out. What I said before was correct. Their first and principal job is to protect the lives and property of the members of the court. And as I said at the time, I'm the first Attorney General who's ever ordered the marshals to protect the residences of the justices and protect them 24/7.
Yes.
That's their principal responsibility. But that doesn't mean that they are in any way precluded from bringing other kinds of arrests.
So thank you so much, Mr. Attorney General. I do have another question for it in a few moments, but when you say they were given the full authority to arrest people violating Section 1507, I would ask, will you take a look at these slides, these materials, dig into them? It is clear that these marshals were given directives that narrowed the scope. Of course, we all want the physical safety. The physical safety of our Supreme Court justice is paramount, and we thank you for sending those marshals there. 1507, though, actually is more all-encompassing than that narrowly tailored objective. And it says picketing or parading near a building or housing if you're doing it with the intent to interfere with, obstruct, or impede the administration of justice or influencing any judge in the discharge of his duty. It's clear when you look at these slides that the marshals were not given those directives. I would like for you to take a look at that. And if you agree with that statement, I'd like for you to amend your testimony to the Judiciary Committee.
There's nothing for me to amend because, as I said, I've never seen those slides before.
I know I need to yield my time. It's clear the marshals were given a different directive, and I would ask you to look into that, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Britt. Attorney General Garland, good to see you here today, and thank you for your...
There's no way I could fill in for you, sir.
I don't know whether that's good or bad.
That's a good one. That's a good one. General Garland, thank you for your service. I really appreciate all the wonderful service you've given our country. I'd like to say first about West Virginia. We're home to NASA, the Customs and Border Protection, Bureau of Fiscal Services. We have the CJIS, the FBI Center. The people there are concerned. They're hearing rumors there's going to be some cutbacks and movement of personnel in CJIS. If you could check that out, that's been tremendously, I understand, tremendously effective agency that's been working there. And Director Gray has just come down and spent some time there. We went together through it, and all of a sudden we heard the CJIS may have some loss of jobs or transfer of jobs, and the people they're hearing these rumors. So if you could help me relieve them of that fear, it'd be very much appreciated. Also, the Hazleton prison we have in the prison system, Hazleton, has had some violent crimes there, but they're having a tremendous problem with shortages of personnel. And there's a law, and we've directed money to be spent there, and it's been in your budget. But for some reason, they're not able to either find employees that want to work there, or the environment, or whatever it may be. And I would hope that you would look into that personally, because that's been a very important system for the Bureau of Prisons, but it's been very troubled.
Yeah, this question of retention and hiring has been a big problem in all the prisons. And as I mentioned, we have a new program which we worked out with the Office of Personnel Management to allow us to provide incentives for retention and hiring.
All we need is a maximum secured thing, and they get some pretty rough characters come through there, and I meet with the staff quite frequently, and they have very much concerns. They'd love to have your attention and your help. The drug epidemic, I can't speak enough about the problems. We're ground zero as West Virginia, and in that situation, that scenario we know, as you said, the precursors are coming from China. Is there no way that we can do anything to stop that, or have China be responsible, knowing that it's been going into the cartels for the manufacturing of fentanyl? We know what's happening. And is there any chance at all the United States government can just say, hey, enough's enough? I mean, we've lost more people to these overdoses than any war we've ever fought. And to sit back and do nothing, can we spend special ops, special forces to match up with the Mexican government if they have a determination to do something? If not, can we, for the benefit of America, do it on our own? Can we go in there,
Makes
take care of the problem and root it out if they're not gonna do it?
their army is weak.
Well, let me
They,
start
when they
with
fight
the
the
drug
drug
problems in
cattle,
West Virginia. As
be
I-
trying to
I-
drug cattle,
we were advised,
they
we
can
just,
beat the drug
arrested
cattle at the
organization.
history, at
It's a
a
very
period
big
of
one,
time.
The largest
Mexico
methamphetamine
was controlled
seizure
by
in
drug
West
law.
Virginia history, well over 200 pounds.
You have a good man there, U.S. Attorney Will Thompson, used to be a federal judge. I mean, he's just a wonderful person, right person, did a heck of a job.
So we're doing the right thing in
Yes, you are.
West Virginia. We've got
There'll be a lot more to do, but we gotta stop the flow of the drugs coming in.
Absolutely, and I think that one of the things we have to do with respect to the precursors are to identify and then sanction the manufacturers in China and then
But
interdict.
quickly, is there anything we can do with China suppliers and also the producers down in Mexico and take it upon ourselves to go after Mexican cartels if the Mexican government won't do it?
Well, I'm going to leave that question to the diplomats in the Defense Department. As far as we're concerned, the DEA is working with them, trying to encourage them to work more together with respect to tackling the cartels. This is a whole of government effort. We just sent the Deputy Attorney General, the Deputy of Homeland Security, the Deputy National Security Advisor, all just went down again to Mexico to meet with the President and their security ministers to try to encourage them more on these joint operations.
My final question, sir, is concerning Ukraine, and I know you just made a visit there. I've called that the most just war that we've ever been in my lifetime, because we're there for the right reason, trying to defend the freedoms and democracies that these countries desire when they have these unwanted attacks, and this absolute horrific attack by Putin. Can you discuss the department's work to hold Russian accountable for the war crimes committed? Can you also provide an updated department's klepto-capture work to seize illicit Russian assets for the benefit of the Ukrainian people? And then finally, I understand Ukraine's made tremendous progress in tackling their corruption within its society, which has been systemic. Can you discuss some of the progress that's been made? So first, I guess you could start with, if you can, the Russian war crimes.
Yeah, I'll get you the numbers separately, so
Sure.
as to not to take the time, but the purpose of this visit of mine was to meet with President Zelensky and with the Prosecutor General, as well as the Prosecutor Generals of all the surrounding countries, all of whom are participating in war crimes investigations. The Prosecutor General has some 40,000 war crimes already registered. The Justice Department is providing forensic help on the ground in Ukraine to evaluate the crime scenes. We are about to put a prosecutor embedded with the Prosecutor General in Kyiv. We have stood up a IT for them using some of what we learned in our various big digital case investigations here, because everybody in Ukraine has an iPhone. And there's millions and millions of digital images of these war crimes as they were occurring. So we're putting that all together. We are supporting efforts in The Hague for a tribunal that will be capable of trying the war criminals. And I've assigned Eli Rosenbaum, who's the head of our Nazi hunting entity in the Justice Department, to lead what we call our War Crimes Accountability Task Force. So that's on that side. On the klepto capture, again, here I met again with a number of the justice ministers when I was in Ukraine. This is my second visit. And here we are in enormous agreement among the EU countries to locate, freeze, and seize the assets of Russian oligarchs who are facilitating this unlawful and unprovoked attack. We have been quite successful in the amount of money that we've seized, and I've already certified a transfer of some of that money to Ukraine for rebuilding, which is the first time we've ever been able to do that kind of forfeiture. On the corruption front, I've spoken heart to heart with the Prosecutor General along with our ambassador. We've gotten made clear to them that our own willingness to continue to provide funds depends on them being sure that the funds go to what they should be going to, and that to not be used with respect to corruption. This is also a condition for ultimate admission to the EU. They are seized with this. They are very concerned to be sure that they eliminate that issue, and As you probably know about, maybe a month before I went to Ukraine, they arrested quite a number of high-level Ukrainian officials on that guard. We'll get you more information on the specifics, for example.
Thank you, sir. I'm so sorry, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Manchin.
I'm a member, as is Senator Collins, of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. We've been trying for a number of weeks to get information from ODNI related to the classified documents in the presence or in the location of the presence of the former vice president, the former president, and the current president. According to ODNI, the Department of Justice is blocking them from providing the committee access to these documents. And the explanation is there's an appointment of a special counsel or the belief that it would otherwise compromise ongoing investigations. I would indicate that it is important for the Intelligence Committee to have access to these documents in our oversight capacity. And if there is, based upon those documents, a need for risk mitigation activities, the Intelligence Committee is obligated to oversee those activities. I also would indicate that prior leadership of the department was able to reach an accommodating circumstance with the Intelligence Committee during the Russia investigation, so there is precedent. General, is it your position that the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence cannot have access to those classified documents recovered from the homes of or offices of President Biden and Trump and Vice President Pence?
Senator, I'm surprised to hear that the NI used the word blocking. I don't want to.
Let me look and see if there's quotes or whether that's my word.
I would say we are working well with them. We believe that there is an accommodation possible. We've been trying to work towards an accommodation. We do have to balance the concerns of ongoing criminal investigations, but we also well recognize the oversight responsibilities and obligations of the committee, and we intend to work out an arrangement that will accommodate those interests. We've been working with the Office of the Director of National Intelligence towards that. We've been making quite a bit of progress recently, and we expect to make further progress.
I hope that that progress can occur. I appreciate your answer that suggests that it will occur, and I hope it occurs in a timely fashion. I would indicate that the Intelligence Committee has no interest in asking who, what, or when. Our interest is in oversight over the intelligence community. So I thank you for that answer. Let me turn to an experience I had about a week ago in Mexico City. It was the Sunday before last. I met, along with a number of my bipartisan and bicameral colleagues, with President Lopez Obrador in Mexico, something you've done on several occasions. I indicated to him that we had work to do in the United States on keeping guns from crossing the border going south, that we needed to do more to help prevent and reduce the use of drugs in the United States. But if we, as we pursued those plans of action, could the President Obrador, do more to encourage and in fact insist, I hope the word I would use is demand, China to eliminate the precursor chemicals coming from China to Mexico before they then cross the border to the United States. He indicated he would formally request that China take action to reduce exportation of fentanyl precursors. I think that is a promising development. The fact remains that cooperation between our two countries on law enforcement matters are extremely important. They are also significantly strained. The Drug Enforcement Administration remains severely constrained in its operational capabilities in Mexico. Excuse me while I turn the page slowly. One of the most significant lessons for me during that trip to Mexico was just how critical it is that we work to improve coordination and cooperation on law enforcement matters. Your first foreign visit to as U.S. Attorney was to Mexico. You visited again there just about 2.5 months ago. Yesterday, NBC News reported that we may be close to a major agreement with the government of Mexico to address both the flow of fentanyl and illegal firearms trafficking. General, what is your assessment of the state of U.S.-Mexico cooperation on law enforcement? Can you provide me any information about such a potential or near agreement? And I guess I'll follow up depending upon what your answers are.
So I can't really say about the pending agreement about those discussions, but I think I would align myself with every single thing that you said with respect to your visit to Mexico and your concerns. Look, the way fentanyl in particular travels is it begins with precursor sales from China to Mexico. In Mexico, it's made into fentanyl, either powder or pills. It crosses the border and then it's transmitted to our communities. The main runners are the Jalisco and the Sinaloa cartels. We need Mexico at every stage to act. We need Mexico to destroy the labs, with respect to which we've had some success. The last time I went to Mexico, right before I went, they destroyed major labs. We need them to crack down on the cartels. We need them to crack down on the purchases of precursor chemicals by Mexican companies and the sales by the Chinese. Likewise, we need to put as much pressure on China as we can to not make those sales. The Treasury Department has recently issued sanctions against some of the precursor chemical dealers in China. We think that's a useful way to cut off some of that, and I know that Treasury will be doing more in that respect. I also agree that the United States has responsibilities to prevent the transshipment of arms from the United States to the cartels in Mexico. As we saw in a very recent arrest of some of the cartel leaders, the Mexican military was almost outgunned by the weaponry that the cartels now have. So I think I would align myself with everything that you've said.
Mr. General, Attorney General, thank you for your answer. My time has expired. If you need resources or tools that this committee can help provide, please let us know. And I would ask you to specifically work to repair the relationship between the Mexican government and the DEA. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Moran. We will now go to Senators Murray and then Collins, and then we will take other questioners in order of appearance. So, Senator Murray.
Well, thank you very much, Chair Shaheen, and to Ranking Member Moran. I think everybody on this dais knows really well that Senator Collins and I...
Thank you, Senator Whitehouse. Senator Grassley?
At last year's FBI oversight hearing, Ray committed to protecting whistleblowers that have approached my office about wrongdoing at the department and the FBI. Do you commit to me, this committee, and the Senate as a whole, that any retaliatory conduct against whistleblowers will be disciplined?
I do, Senator, and you know well, more than any other member of this committee, that I've been a staunch supporter of whistleblowers and of the False Claims Act during the entire period of my role as a judge as well.
I'm going to set up a hypothetical fact pattern for you and ask you to tell me how you would handle it. The Justice Department and the FBI received information from over a dozen sources. That's the first one. Second, those sources provide similar information about potential criminal conduct relating to a single individual. And third, that information was shared with the Department and FBI over a period of years. According to department policy and procedures, what steps would the department take to determine the truth and accuracy of the information provided by those sources?
I'm sorry, these are whistleblowers, so they're internal sources, is that what you're saying? I'm not sure.
Doesn't matter where that comes from, just the fact that I want to know you got that information. How would you go about handling it?
Yeah. So reports of wrongdoing are normally reported to whatever the appropriate department component is. It might be U.S. Attorney's offices in the district in which it allegedly took place. It might be to the directly to FBI components, to FBI task forces. In cases involving whistleblowers, of course, there are specific provisions for making complaints to the Inspector General's office or the Office of Professional Responsibility or the Inspections Division of the FBI.
Recent lawfully protected whistleblower disclosures to my office indicate that the Justice Department and the FBI had at one time over a dozen sources that provided potentially criminal information relating to Hunter Biden. The alleged volume and similarity of the information would demand that the Justice Department investigate the truth and accuracy of the information. Accordingly, what steps has the Justice Department taken to determine the truth and accuracy of information provided? Congress and the American people, I think, have a right to know.
So as the committee well knows from my confirmation hearing, I promised to leave the matter of Hunter Biden in the hands of the U.S. Attorney for the District of Delaware, who was appointed in the previous administration. So any information like that should have gone, or should have gone to that U.S. Attorney's offices and the FBI squad that's working with him. I have pledged not to interfere with that investigation, and I have carried through on my pledge.
In April 2022, you testified to Senator Hagerty that the Hunter Biden investigation was insulated from political interference because it was assigned to, as you just now told me, to the Delaware Attorney's Office. However, that could be misleading because without special counsel authority, he could need permission of another U.S. attorney in certain circumstances to bring charges outside the District of Delaware. I'd like clarification from you with respect to these concerns.
The U.S. Attorney in Delaware has been advised that he has full authority to make those kind of referrals that you're talking about, or to bring cases in other jurisdictions if he feels it's necessary. And I will assure that if he does, he will be able to do that.
Does the Delaware U.S. Attorney lack independent charging authority over certain criminal allegations against the president's son outside of the District of Delaware?
He would have to bring, if it's in another district, he would have to bring the case in another district. But as I said, I promised to ensure that he's able to carry out his investigation and that he be able to run it. And if he needs to bring it in another jurisdiction, he will have full authority to do that.
If you provided the Delaware U.S. Attorney with special counsel authority, isn't it true that he wouldn't need permission of another U.S. Attorney to bring charges?
It's a kind of a complicated question. If under the regulations, that kind of act, he would have to bring to me, to the Attorney General under the regulations. Those kind of charging decisions would have to be brought. I would then have to, authorize it and permit it to be brought in another jurisdiction. And that is exactly what I promised to do here already. That if he needs to bring a case in another jurisdiction, he will have my full authority to do that.
Has the Delaware U.S. Attorney sought permission from permission of another U.S. Attorney's office, such as in the District of Columbia or in California, to bring charges? If so, was it denied?
So I don't know the answer to that. I do, and I don't want to get into the internal elements of decision making by the U.S. Attorney, but he has been advised that he is not to be denied anything that he needs, and if that were to happen, it should ascend through the department's ranks. And I have not heard anything from that office to suggest that they are not able to do everything that the U.S. Attorney wants to do.
Well, let me give you my view. If Weiss, the U.S. Attorney there in Delaware, must seek permission from a Biden appointed U.S. Attorney to bring charges, then the Hunter Biden criminal investigation isn't insulated from political interference, as you've publicly proclaimed. If the Justice Department received information that foreign persons had evidence of improper or unlawful financial payment paid to elected officials or other politically exposed persons, and those payments may have influenced policy decisions, would that pose a national security concern and demand a full investigation? And when Ray was here, he seemed to answer that question that it was a national security concern. I want your opinion.
In the way that if I follow the question exactly right, if it's an agent of a foreign government asking someone and paying someone to do things to support that foreign government in secret, yes, I definitely think that would be a national security problem.
Okay, my last question is to whistleblowers have confidentially asserted that the DOJ's public integrity unit, I think I'm going to leave that question for another round. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Senator Grassley. Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Attorney General Garland, for being here.
For attending. In your opening statement, you said that you work to uphold civil rights. Is the Sixth Amendment one of those in the Bill of Rights?
The Sixth Amendment is one.
It is, great.
Certainly a civil right.
And you work to uphold civil rights for all Americans, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. When the Sixth Amendment of the Constitution says the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury, what kind of a time frame does a speedy trial mean?
Well, there's two different ones. So there's the Speedy Trial Act.
That's correct.
I used to be able to tell you exactly how long it took, but I believe at least the first part I remember is 30 days from the complaint.
That's correct.
I think it's 120 days after that, and then there are exceptions for different motions for a speedy trial.
Okay, I believe it says 70 days from the filing of charges of the defendant's appearance
It's been a
before the
long time
judicial
since
officer.
I actually appeared in magistrate's court to make that argument.
Okay, great. I'm glad you are well aware of that. Mark Houck was arrested September 23rd, 2022 and found not guilty on January 30th, 2023. The jury deliberated about an hour. DOJ accused Houck of twice assaulting the volunteer in front of a Planned Parenthood clinic and charged him with 2 counts of violating the FACE Act, freedom of access to clinic entrances. The arrest to the trial took just over 4 months. Would you consider that a speedy trial?
Yes.
All right, so would I. Last week, I visited the D.C. Department of Corrections and met with some of the 20 prisoners who were arrested in connection to the events at the Capitol on January the 6th. According to a Just Security article that came out on March the 20th, 11 of the 20 have not accepted a plea deal, nor have they even been brought to trial. Today is March the 29th, 2023. Attorney General Garland, is it correct that since their arrest, some of these individuals have been waiting approximately 2 years for their trial?
I don't know the specifics of individual cases. The beauty of the Sixth Amendment is that each of those people is entitled to a lawyer, has a lawyer who can make a speedy trial argument in the court. Oftentimes lawyers
In
ask
the
for
United
more
States,
time.
I
Oftentimes
try
they
to
ask for
find a lawyer
exceptions
for at least
discovery.
over 20 times.
Sometimes
Now, for
monetary
lawyer
resources.
willing to take my case, and I
Does
have
waiting 2
money.
years for a trial meet the speedy trial clause of the Sixth Amendment?
I'm millionaire in America. I mean, I'm just a poor millionaire because I don't use you are rich
Responsibility
man.
of lawyers for those defendants to bring to
Well, I would like you to look into that because to me, I don't think waiting 2 years for your trial complies with the Sixth Amendment of the Constitution.
This is an argument to be made before the judge. The judge has the authority to dismiss a case for a violation of the speedy trial.
You're absolutely correct. A judge does have that authority. You know, like you said in your opening statement, you work to uphold the civil rights of all Americans. I think in this case, their civil rights are being violated, and I would appreciate you looking into that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm listening with interest to the comments of the gentleman from Pennsylvania. I'm glad that he got a response, the minority got a response to their letter. I also sit on judiciary, and my chairman, Mr. Jordan, has asked me to ask you about a letter he sent back in January, asking you to appear before his committee. He has not gotten a response to that letter. And so I'd ask you, can I get a commitment from you to respond to him in the immediate future with several dates that would be during which you would be available to appear before the Judiciary Committee?
Of course, I'm going to appear before that committee. I understand there are discussions about scheduling that have been going on. I don't think there's any problem in that respect.
There's been no response to the letter, so I think there's some question about whether you would be willing to appear. So getting your commitment to appear is helpful, and I
I
thank
am
you for
willing,
that.
more than willing.
Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Deputy Monaco, for being here, and thanks for your service. In early March, we had Attorney General Garland before this committee, and I asked him a series of questions about 18 U.S.C. Section 1507, and specifically why no arrests have been made at the homes of Supreme Court justices in violation of that statute, which prohibits people from protesting or demonstrating outside the home of a Supreme Court justice or a judge or a juror or other officer of the court with intent to influence any court proceeding. His answer was succinct, but amounted to the effect that the marshals are on the ground, and the marshals have full authority to arrest under any federal statute, including Section 1507. About 3 weeks later, my friend and colleague from Alabama, Senator Katie Britt, before another committee, asked Attorney General Garland about a slide deck that she had discovered that was being used to train the U.S. Marshals who were performing their protective detail duty at the homes of Supreme Court justices. These slides seem to contradict what Attorney General Garland had told me 3 weeks earlier. They contradicted in several respects. First of all, the slide number 4 says that in order to make an arrest there, they really need to be looking at something that demonstrates, quote, the intent of influencing any judge language, thus logically goes to criminal threats and intimidation, not First Amendment protest activities. Now, I personally, as I poured through that statute, I don't see that as an element of the offense. It's not an element of the offense. There's nothing in there that requires it to have this separate, non-specified element within 1507 about the intent being something amounting to criminal threats and intimidation. That's not in there. Just as troubling, maybe even more so, is slide number 5, cited by Senator Britt at that same hearing, where it says that, quote, any contemplated U.S. Marshal Service enforcement action under 1507 should be coordinated in advance with the appropriate U.S. Attorney's Office. And as if that were not enough to discourage the marshals from making arrests under Section 1507 in this circumstance, it goes on to say that it is counterproductive to make probable cause arrests on cases that the U.S. Attorney's Office will not charge and prosecute. So I've been wondering, how exactly is it considered to be the full authority to arrest people under Section 1507, as the Attorney General has described, if you have to get pre-clearance first to do it, and if you're adding an additional element, one not found in the United States Code?
Well, Senator, I know the Attorney General has spoken quite directly to this about the direction that he has given and has repeatedly given to the Marshal Service, and the Marshal Service Director.
When he was asked about these slides, by the way, he was not aware of them. Were you aware of them? Were you aware of them before they were given to the Marshal Service to train marshals on how to protect the homes of Supreme Court justices?
No, Senator, but I also know that the Marshal Service Director has been very clear that he is will regularly review the training provided to the Deputy U.S. Marshals, who continue to this day to provide 24/7 protection for the justices, their homes, their property, at the unprecedented direction of Attorney General Garland last year. This has never happened before in the history of the department.
I understand that, but I'm asking about the enforcement of Section 1507. Now, you're the Deputy Attorney General. Under the organizational chart of the Department of Justice, you have supervisory authority, oversight over the U.S. Marshal Service. Is that right?
That's correct.
And so you're saying you had not seen these slides before the marshals were trained on it?
That's
I assume you've reviewed them since then?
I've seen the slides that you referenced that Senator Britt showed to the Attorney General.
And have you discussed them with Attorney General Garland?
I have not, Senator, but I would like to make very clear the direction the Attorney General gave to the Director of the U.S. Marshal Service, who himself has indicated that he has been told repeatedly by the Attorney General that he has full authority to enforce all federal laws, including 1507, as long as he's prioritizing, and the Deputy U.S. Marshals are prioritizing the life, the safety, the protection of the property of the justices, which is
under any of the other federal statutes under which they're authorized to make an arrest on the ground, Have they added an additional non-statutory element to the offense, or have they required pre-clearance with the U.S. Attorney's Office prior to making a probable cause arrest?
Well, Senator, without necessarily adopting your interpretation of the slides, the director of the Marshal Service has been very clear. He's going to regularly review that training. He's got all the authority repeatedly given to him and directed by the Attorney General to enforce federal law. His priority, however, and that of the Deputy U.S. Marshals who are providing that security and that protection, is for the property, the life, the safety of the justices and their families.
And yet, since this slide was revealed to the public, he hasn't either corrected his statement or gone back to the Marshal's Service and asked that the additional non-statutory element be removed, or asked that the pre-clearance from the U.S. Attorney's Office be approved prior to the making of a probable cause arrest under Section 1507.
The statement by the Attorney General was very clear and not in need of correction. He was very clear about the direction that he is given to the Marshal Service.
He had no idea what direction had been given to the Marshal Service. No idea whatsoever. So we can say a lot of things about it. It was not clear, and he hasn't cleared it up, and it's rather inconsistent with what he told us in front of this committee.
Respectfully, Senator, the Attorney General was clear. His direction to the Marshal Service, to the Marshal Service Director, was to prioritize the life, safety, and protection of the property of the justices, to have the full authority to enforce any federal law.
With pre-clearance and with additional elements not found in the statute.
Respectfully, Senator, that was not the Attorney General's testimony. That was not his statement, his direction to the
Well, he wasn't aware
director.
of it. It couldn't be in his statement. He didn't know about it. Not when he talked to me, not when he talked to my colleague, Katie Britt. I see my time's expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Lee. Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized. I thank the chairman. Mr. Durham, thank you for testifying today. Thank you for your service to
It's been a real pleasure.
Our country. Well, we appreciate your service to our country, to the Department of Justice. I've read your report, as I suspect most of the members of the committee have, and appreciated your work. I want to talk a bit about your interactions with Maine Justice, the Department of Justice in particular, with Attorney General Garland. Did Attorney General Garland permit your inquiry to proceed independently?
Yes.
Did Attorney General Garland interfere with your inquiry, your investigation in any way?
No.
Did Attorney General Garland attempt to prevent or stop you or your team from taking any investigative step that you deemed necessary?
He did not.
Did Attorney General Garland provide support to your efforts?
In terms of occasionally we need some additional personnel. In a couple of instances, we had a person that was detailed from Maine Justice. Yes, so in that respect, yes.
Did Attorney General Garland decline to implement any of the recommendations that you've made?
I don't know that.
The letter, the report, I believe it's on page 3 of your report, you say, and I'll quote, "After the inauguration of President Biden, Attorney General Garland met with the Office of the Special Counsel. The office very much appreciates the support consistent with his testimony," referring to Attorney General Garland, "during his confirmation hearings that the Attorney General has provided to our efforts and the department's willingness to allow us to operate independently," end quote. You stand by that, I suspect.
I do.
Correct. Sounds like the Department of Justice and the Attorney General were supportive of your efforts, did not interfere in any way with the work that you did over the course of the last several years. There are some folks here in Congress, some colleagues of mine on the other side of the aisle, who have talked about or indicated their desire to defund the Department of Justice. Do you believe the Department of Justice should be defunded?
I don't believe these discussions about defunding the police make any sense at all for the security of the nation, and I don't think defunding cornerstone law enforcement entities make a whole lot of sense. Maybe more oversight, but defunding in our cities and streets and so forth, no, that doesn't make sense to me. But I've only been at this for 40 years.
Sure. Well, and as I said, I am grateful to your service and for your service rather, and I guess I just want to put a finer point on it because I guess I didn't hear that in your answer. You said a cornerstone of law enforcement. I take that you mean the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice obviously should not be defunded, right? You've committed your career to the Department of Justice. You were a former U.S. attorney, a former acting U.S. attorney, 35 years as an assistant U.S. attorney. You have a decorated record of service to the department. I'm hoping you're willing to say on the record clearly that you don't believe the department should be defunded.
I don't believe the Department of Justice or the FBI should be defunded. I think there ought to be some changes and the like, but defunded, no.
Thank you. And I appreciate your candor, and I agree with you. With respect to the Office of the Special Counsel, of course, you concluded your service. As you know, there are different special counsels that are appointed from time to time. You've served in that capacity multiple times yourselves. There is discussion of defunding special counsels. Do you support more broadly the principle of defunding the Office of the Special Counsel?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would have to know the particulars of what the discussion is, but I mean, the general notion that you would establish special counsel office, the special counsel is doing an investigation, that you're going to defund it would not make sense to me.
Yeah, I agree. And just to put a finer point on this, you served as special counsel for a period of years. During the course of your investigation, for the bulk of that time, Democrats were in control of the United States House of Representatives. There was no effort that I'm aware of to defund your office. And I assume that you would have construed that if someone had made an effort to defund the Office of Special Counsel, your office, as you were undertaking your investigation, as political interference, to the extent that that was being done to try to impair or impinge on your investigation. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, I mean, if it were our office, our team, I guess I'd have to know the basis of that to see if I thought it was, political or,
let's say it's because people
spending too much money.
Sure. Let's say it's because people disagreed with the work that you were doing. They didn't like the investigation. They disagreed fundamentally with decisions you were making. I presume you would construe that as political interference.
Special counsel should operate independently. That's the whole purpose of special counsel. So,
I certainly agree. And again, I thank you for being here. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Do you believe, I'm going to shift to combating gun violence. Do you believe that a prohibited person that acquires a gun illegally and disposes it in a dumpster where a criminal or an innocent child could gain access to it should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law?
This is no longer a hypothetical question. You're referring to a specific case which is now in judicial determination before a court of law. It's not appropriate for me to comment on that case.
So, for the record, Mr. Chairman, let's understand that the same prosecuting attorney who is now the special counsel gave a sweetheart deal to that person. And yes, you are correct. We're referring to the president's son. He got a sweetheart deal, and the judge was smart enough to smell a rat when she saw it, and she said, you guys go back to the drawing board. That same special counsel is in charge of this investigation. Isn't that correct, Mr. Chairman? Absolutely. I want to close real quickly with this. There was a World Naked Bike Ride in Madison, Wisconsin, just a couple months ago, and I sent you a letter 2 months ago asking if you had a problem with that because it exposed a 10-year-old girl by the race organizer, the bike organizers, to pedaling around Madison, Wisconsin naked. Do you think that's a problem? And why did you not answer our letter from 2 months ago?
I'm sorry, I'll have to ask the Office of Legislative Affairs to get back to you about this.
Does it typically take 2 months to be able to answer questions like this?
No, it sounds like you're asking about a question about state and local law enforcement. We get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of letters. I'll ask the Office of Legislative Affairs where that letter is.
State and local law enforcement would not act. We were hoping you would. It's obvious you're not. I yield.
Gentleman yields back. With that, I would yield to the gentleman from New York, the ranking member, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, at the outset, let me make two comments. One, just about every assertion you made in your opening statement has been completely refuted by witnesses who have testified before this committee. Two, far from being favored, many commentators have noted that people accused of simple gun possession while under the influence of a drug, when that a gun was not used in the commission of a crime are rarely, if ever, prosecuted the way Hunter Biden is being prosecuted. Mr. Chairman, one of this committee's most important duties is conducting oversight of the Department of Justice. We are called upon to ensure that the DOJ uses the enormous amount of power it is granted in a fair, just manner that respects the civil and human rights of all Americans. The Attorney General of the United States oversees issues that affect the lives of each and every American. Violent crime, drug trafficking, attacks on our civil rights, threats to our national security, and environmental crimes all fall under his purview. That is why we regularly request that he or she appear before this committee to speak about the work the department is doing for the welfare of the country. This is how we ensure that the department stays accountable to the American people. But if we're up to the Republicans, Americans will hear nothing about any of these substantive issues today. They would hear nothing about the rise in domestic terrorism and what the Justice Department is doing about it. They would hear nothing about what the department is doing to stop hate crimes and prevent gun violence. They would hear nothing about how the department is disrupting efforts by Russia, China, and others to interfere in our elections. Extreme MAGA Republicans have poisoned our vital oversight work. They've ignored our legitimate oversight responsibilities and used their power to stage one political stunt after another. They've wasted countless taxpayer dollars on baseless investigations into President Biden and his family, desperate to find evidence for an absurd impeachment and desperate to distract from the mounting legal peril facing Donald Trump. They have fought tirelessly to stop efforts to fight malign foreign actors trying to influence and manipulate Americans through social media. They have unconstitutionally interfered in criminal litigation and attempted to bully state and local law enforcement officers. They have publicized the names of witnesses who did not further their political goals, leading to threats of death and physical violence against those witnesses and their families. They have cost any number of private institutions and companies millions of dollars in legal fees as they struggle to respond to ridiculous and overbroad requests for information and transcribed interviews. They have issued subpoenas for show without making meaningful attempts to get the information they seek by consent. They have levied low, baseless personal attacks on any prosecutor to bring charges against Donald Trump or January 6th rioters. They have attempted to discredit investigators who are not hard enough on Donald Trump's political opponents. They have supported those involved in the deadly attack on our Capitol on January 6th in an attempt to overthrow a lawful election. They have justified conduct that we all know to be wildly illegal, like the theft of classified materials and incitement to violence. And through it all, rather than try to unite the country or solve the problems that affect us all, they have sought to exploit our divisions for cynical, personal political gain. That is their goal, division. They want to divide this country and make our government appear like it's broken, because that is when their broken political party thrives. So today, I implore the public to see through the sham. I have no doubt that you will hear a deluge of conspiracy theories and baseless accusations. They will quote freely from so-called whistleblowers who have been broadly discredited or contradicted. They will viciously attack federal law enforcement. They will tell you that all 91 criminal charges against Donald Trump are part of a conspiracy, despite overwhelming evidence of each of Donald Trump's crimes. And they will attack Special Counsel Weiss, who was appointed, let us not forget, by Donald Trump, for not being hard enough on Hunter Biden. Republicans will continue doing what they've done for years, discrediting anyone who does not serve their political goals at any cost. And the shame of it is that in this hearing room, like on the House floor, where we are barreling towards a government shutdown while my Republican colleagues call each other names, we could be working together to put people over politics and to solve any number of problems affecting the American people. More than 30,000 Americans have died from gun violence so far this year alone. Guns have become the leading cause of death for children aged 1 to 17, surpassing car accidents. Domestic violent extremism and white nationalism are on the rise. We are seeing active clubs and other white supremacist groups pop up around the country. Anti-Semitism is at an all-time high. Malign foreign actors like Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea are attempting to influence our elections. Political rhetoric is causing threats against law enforcement officials to skyrocket. Our immigration court system is in desperate need of reform. Our election workers receive death threats from conspiracy theory-driven extremists. Fentanyl is filling our streets and poisoning our children at historic rates. This list goes on, and we, the people in this room, are in a position to do something about it. In fact, it is our duty to do something about it, consistent with the oath we took when we were sworn in as members of Congress. We could work with the Department of Justice and Attorney General Garland to address any number of real substantive problems facing the American people. Instead, House Republicans will use their time today to talk about long discredited conspiracy theories and Hunter Biden's laptop. They will do it because they care more about Donald Trump than they do about their own constituents. I hope my colleagues will see reason and at least attempt to work with the Attorney General in good faith. Sadly, on the other side of the aisle, reason and good faith seem to be in short supply. In any event, Mr. Attorney General, I thank you for your testimony and thank you in advance for your patience.
The gentleman from Oregon is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Attorney General, for being here today. I would like to go back briefly to your remarks regarding before the Senate when you were confirmed and your promise regarding Mr. Weiss. Can you explain to us in a little more detail who you promised that you would keep Mr. Weiss on this case? To whom was that promise made?
Yeah, so a number of senators in my meetings with them asked me to make that promise. I think that was discussed in my interchange with a senator from Tennessee, I believe.
And did that promise that you made lead you to believe that even if that Mr. Weiss displayed a level of incompetence, that you would be precluded from asking him to step down or precluded from replacing him?
Look, when someone asked me to make this appointment, they didn't ask me depending upon what the outcome was. Mr. Weiss has made his appointment, decisions, and Mr. Weiss is an experienced federal prosecutor with extensive experience and with sufficient credibility to be appointed by President Trump. I just have no grounds for interfering here.
Right, so you haven't answered the question. The question was really what level of incompetence displayed by a prosecutor under your control would it take for you to make a change? But let's move on. The level of incompetence I'm referring to, I'll just read this to you. This is the same Weiss who headed an investigation that was trashed by whistleblowers who alleged that his investigation had been fixed from the outset. It's the same Weiss who ran an investigation in which agents were allegedly prevented from asking about Joe Biden, obstructed in their efforts to pursue questions, compromised by tip-offs to the Biden team on planned searches. It was the same Weiss who reportedly allowed the statute of limitations to run out on Hunter's major tax offenses, even though he had the option to extend it. It was the same Weiss who did not indict on major tax felonies and cut a plea deal that brushed aside a felony gun charge. It was the same Weiss who inked a widely panned sweetheart deal that caused a federal judge to balk it and trash a sweeping immunity grant, language that even the prosecutor admitted never been seen in a previous plea deal. So there's a list of what I would suggest under many people's definition would be incompetence. Are you saying that that's inadequate for you to have questioned what he was doing?
I'm saying that all of these are allegations. I don't know what the facts of them are. I have, as I've explained, stayed out of this investigation. I was not present at any of the meetings discussed. Some of the meetings occurred under the previous administration, where Mr. Weiss was assigned to the matter by the previous Justice Department, and I'm not in a position to comment on them.
That's too bad. Is that there's a scope of investigation memo generally issued when we start these things out. Who issued that scope of investigation memo to Mr. Weiss? Was it done back on when he was originally appointed to take on the Biden case? Is that when the memo was telling him what he was supposed to do was issued? Is there a scope of investigation memo is my question.
There's a scope of investigation with respect to special counsel, and that has been publicly transmitted to the chairman of this Judiciary Committee and the Senate Judiciary Committee.
And who wrote it?
Who wrote that scope?
Yeah. Who decided what What should be within the scope of that investigation?
I'm sorry?
Who wrote the memo? Who decided what the scope of that?
I decided what should be in the scope. If you'll compare that to the scope of many other special counsels, it basically is modeled on the format that we've used in the past, not only in this administration, but the previous one.
In your remarks delivered on August 11th of this year concerning the appointment of David Weiss as special counsel, you say, upon considering his request, as well as, quote, the extraordinary circumstances relating to this matter, end quote. Can you tell us what those extraordinary circumstances were?
I'm sorry.
Okay, so these are your remarks back on August 11th.
Yes.
And it says, on Tuesday of this week, Mr. Weiss advised me that, I'm just quoting from your memo, this is what he says. In his judgment, his investigation has reached a stage at which he should continue his work as special counsel, and he asked to be so appointed. Upon considering his request, as well as, quote, the extraordinary circumstances related to this matter, end quote, I've concluded it's in the best public interest to appoint him special counsel. What were those extraordinary circumstances you're talking about?
Yeah, look, all of these special counsels, including the appointment by Mr. Barr with respect to Mr. Durham, uses those phrases. The reason he uses those phrases is because that's in the special counsel regulation. I've said as much as I can say with respect to that without discussing matters relating to a pending investigation. I can't discuss matters with respect to a pending investigation for the reasons I've said.
Thank you. Yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I'm going to direct your attention to a video here that we're going to play.
Obviously, that's a significant matter. It is an ongoing criminal investigation, and so I'm not going to comment on an ongoing criminal investigation.
Were those pipe bombs operable?
Again,
The ATF is the expert.
Again, it's an ongoing criminal investigation, and under long-standing policy, I cannot comment.
As you know, this is a very active, ongoing investigation, and there are some restrictions on that, but we will
Yes,
do
we
our
can
best
handle
to
classified information, and we fund your department, and so you need to provide that.
It's not, respectfully, it's not an issue of classification. It's an issue of commenting on ongoing criminal investigations, which is something that by longstanding department policy, we are restricted in doing. And in fact, the last administration actually strengthened those policies partly
That's
because...
not our policy, though, and we fund you, so let's move on. Do you know how...
So I'm not going to violate this norm of the rule of law. I'm not going to comment on an investigation that's ongoing.
Peter Navarro was indicted for contempt of Congress. Aren't you, in fact, in contempt of Congress when you give us this answer? This is an answer that's appropriate at a press conference. It's not an answer that's appropriate when we are asking questions. We are the committee that is responsible for your creation, for your existence of your department. You cannot continue to give us these answers. Aren't you, in fact, in contempt of Congress when you refuse to answer?
Congressman, I have the greatest respect for Congress. I also have the greatest respect for the Constitution and laws of the United States. The protection of pending investigations and ongoing investigations, as I briefly discussed in another dialogue a few moments ago, goes back to the separation of powers, which gives to the executive branch the sole authority to conduct prosecutions. It's a requirement of due process and respect for those who are under investigation, the protection of their civil rights.
Well, with all due respect to that, Iran-Contra was an ongoing investigation, and that didn't stop Congress from getting the answers. And you're getting in the way of our constitutional duty. You're citing the Constitution. I'm going to cite it. It's our constitutional duty to do oversight. Now, in that video, that was your answer to a question to me 2 years ago when I said how many agents or assets of the government were present on January 5th and January 6th and agitating in the crowd to go into the Capitol and how many went into the Capitol. Can you answer that now?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Oh, last time, you don't know how many there were or there were none?
I don't know the answer to either of those questions. If there were any, I don't know how many. I don't know whether there are any.
I think you may have just perjured yourself that you don't know that there were any. You want to say that again? That you don't know that there were any?
I have no personal knowledge of this matter. I think what I said the last time.
You've had 2 years to find out. And the day, by the way, that was in reference to Ray Epps, and yesterday you indicted him. Isn't that a wonderful coincidence? On a misdemeanor. Meanwhile, you're sending grandmas to prison. You're putting people away for 20 years for merely filming. Some people weren't even there yet. You got the guy on video. He's saying go into the Capitol. He's directing people to the Capitol before the speech ends. He's at the site of the first breach. You've got all the goods on him, 10 videos, and it's an indictment for a misdemeanor? The American public isn't buying it. I yield the balance of my time to Chairman Jordan.
May I answer the question?
I'm going to ask you one now. We'll let the gentleman.
Yeah.
Go ahead, but
in discovery, in the cases that were filed with respect to January 6, the Justice Department prosecutors provided whatever information they had about the question that you're asking. With respect to Mr. Epps, the FBI has said that he was not an employee or informant of the FBI. Mr. Epps has been charged, and there's a proceeding, I believe, going on today on that subject.
The charge is a joke. I yield to the chairman.
The time the gentleman has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California.
Mr. Attorney.
Recognized for her 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. General Garland, thanks so much for being here today. I know it's been a long day for you. Now, I'm relatively new to the committee and I'm still getting my feet under me, but as far as I can tell, what we are doing here today is talking about a lot of conspiracy theories, and it's frustrating and tedious for those of us in the committee, but I can tell you it is absolutely maddening for my constituents back home in Vermont. We have so much important work to do to keep the government open. We're days away from a shutdown, and I just want to remind folks that we're in this situation because my colleagues across the aisle are reneging on a deal that a majority of their conference made along with their speaker. That's why we are in this situation. If they're successful in shutting down the government, seniors who rely on Social Security benefits will be impacted. Thousands of Medicare recipients and applicants will be impacted. Service members will stop receiving paychecks. Veteran services will be curtailed. Those are the grim consequences from Republicans' inability and unwillingness to govern. I need to just start with that. Let's do some level setting here. Now, let's get to the real work of the DOJ and how Congress can help the agency better serve its mission. Gun violence continues to plague our nation. We see the wreckage every day on our television sets, on our computers, and in our communities. As a member of the Gun Violence Prevention Task Force, this issue is incredibly important to me and so many of my constituents. Now, I believe there's actual room for bipartisan congressional action on gun violence, at least in some areas. One of those areas, red flag laws. It's a great place to start. Vermont is one of 21 states that was able to pass red flag laws. These laws are working to keep guns out of the hands of people who are in crisis. And yet many states did not even apply for funding from the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act to better implement red flag laws and to raise awareness about the program. In June 2021, DOJ published model legislation to help states craft their own extreme risk protection order. Now, Republicans continue to make unfounded accusations that these laws violate civil rights by taking guns away from Americans without any due process. Can you explain the due process protections that are put into place in the model legislation that DOJ proposed?
Yes, and I would start by saying, of course, there's room for bipartisan agreement, and the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act is a very good example. And that includes the ability to have funding for states that want to craft and put into place red flag laws. The requirement is that the red flag law include due process protections. So I don't know every element of the model legislation, but the general idea is relatives or friends of the person have to go to a court and get some kind of adjudication that the person is a danger to themselves or to others. This normally relates to mental illness problems. It may relate to some others.
But
so if a gun is
related
taken
to
away,
mental
under
illness
those
question,
circumstances,
the
there's
doctor
then
need to
a
talk
right
to patient first,
appeal,
without force them to eat a drug or needle. And what the other issue you are talking about anyway?
Every technicality, but I think that's about it.
No, I appreciate that, and it's especially important to states like mine, rural states that have real issues with the silent killers, domestic violence, and also suicide. And so these are instances in which red flag laws can really make a difference. Shifting gears here.
I've been told you by Democrat president since 2016, not 2021.
Agencies to finalize them. Corporate concentration remains a pressing problem for the U.S. economy, and I fear that we're falling behind in this area, and American consumers continue to feel the pain because of this. With the introduction of the draft merger guidelines, how does the department plan to ensure that future mergers and acquisitions do not stifle competition or harm consumers? Because that's often the pushback that we get.
Joe Biden.
Yeah, I think obviously the intention of the merger guidelines is to set
Black
forth
Jose
the enforcement
Obama
policy of the
was
department.
Obamacare. They're using
different generations
this
of the
to
guidelines.
against
all the
voice
way
they
back
don't
to the
want
time
to
when I
hear.
was in law school.
They try to
have
hide
been adopted and been helpful to
their evil
generations of
criminal
judges.
activity
I've
toward
had
the
at
public.
least 2 or 3 merger cases myself where we used some of the learning from the merger guidelines. The current guidelines reflect really an adjustment to the current technology, two-sided platforms, network effects that simply did not exist at the time of the last set of merger guidelines were passed.
Thank you, Attorney General. Just briefly in closing, last year you spoke on the subject and said that DOJ's enforcement against corporate crime has waxed and waned, but it's waxing again. That is news to my ears. Thank you so much for your service. I yield back.
Lady, the chair now recognizes the gentleman from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a slide up here. I'll start. In October or March of 22, Mr. Weiss was denied the ability to bring charges against Hunter Biden in the District of Columbia. In April of that same year, you testified before the Senate Appropriations Committee that Mr. Weiss was free to run the investigation without interference from the DOJ. According to the IRS whistleblower, there was a meeting in October of 22 where Mr. Weiss said that he was not the deciding official on whether charges were filed. And we know that because we have handwritten notes from the IRS whistleblowers that was confirmed in an email to people in the meeting. Later in January, Mr. Weiss was denied the ability to bring charges again against Hunter Biden in the Central District of California. You testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee in March of this year that he had full authority. That Weiss confirmed that to us in a letter in June, that he had been granted, quote, full authority over this matter. But then he kind of backed up. In June 30th, he said, well, just kidding. My charging authority is geographically limited to my home district in Delaware. And of course, you appoint him as special counsel. So why the heck has his story changed so many times over the course of these investigations?
Congressman, I've seen all the 3 letters. I've read them quite carefully. They are all consistent with each other. And I urge everyone watching this on television or anyone who's interested to look at those 3 letters. They are not inconsistent with each other, and there's no change in the story.
So, but you agree that he had, and you've said this publicly, that he had ultimate authority prior to the appointment of special counsel.
I've explained this repeatedly here. I've explained this in another proceeding. I said that Mr. Weiss would have the authority to bring a case in any jurisdiction in which he wanted to, and Mr. Weiss has confirmed that he would have that authority. I explained that if he had to bring a case in another jurisdiction, as a matter of mechanics, it would require me me or a delegatee of mine to sign a 515 order. That is very common.
But Mr. Attorney General,
there was nothing stopping that from happening.
Forgive me for a second, though, but when you say you have ultimate, when he wrote a letter on your behalf in June, I have ultimate authority. This is prior to the designation of special counsel. Ultimate to me means like that you can go wherever you want to.
Ultimate means
at that particular point, sir, could he file charges in the District of South Carolina? he would not have that ability, correct? He would have to go through that U.S. attorney. So that's not full authority.
All he would have to do is ask me for 515 authority, and I would
I
sign
have
it right
515
away, just like
authority.
when he asked me to be special counsel. Within 3 days, I signed that.
So he didn't have ultimate authority.
He had the authority because I promised that he would have the authority.
But he did not have that authority. See, here's where I'm going. If he was denied the ability to bring charges in March of 22 in the District of Columbia, if he was denied the ability to bring charges in January of 23 in the Central District of California, that's not full authority. These U.S. attorneys operate as gatekeepers, so that's not full authority to do much of anything. And you know what's remarkable to me? We sit here and we look at this, and his story has changed so many times. You know whose story hasn't changed? Mr. Shapley, Mr. Ziegler, the emails that confirm that he said, I'm not the deciding person on whether charges are filed. And you know what the response back was from his colleague at work? Yep, you covered it all, Gary. That is consistent. What Mr. Weiss has done is this shell game and saying that he has authority, he doesn't have authority, but these gatekeepers at the U.S. Attorney's Office in the District of Columbia and in the Central District of California, they would have the gatekeeping authority on whether charges are brought in their jurisdictions.
I'm sorry,
Absent that designation, correct?
Those words have no meaning, gatekeepers, etc. Mr. Weiss said he was never denied authority. I'm the one with the authority to decide who can prosecute in a different jurisdiction, and I promised that he would have that authority. I do not see any inconsistency here. I was not at the meeting that Mr. Shapley was referring to. I know what I guaranteed, and I know what Mr. Weiss has said I guaranteed.
Mr. Chairman, I yield the balance of my time.
It's a sip. Policy here. An individual who is believed to be providing useful and credible information to the FBI from any authorized information collection activity, and from whom what the FBI expects or intends to obtain additional, useful, and credible information in the future. All right? And whose identity, information, or relationship with the FBI warrants confidential handling. So these guys are individuals. You pay them $42 million a year. Did you know that? The IG said you're paying these sources $42 million a year. Did you know that?
I know informants are.
It's $42 million a year. So do you believe that they're credible? They're valuable. The FBI is using these guys. We're paying them a lot of money. Would you agree with that?
I agree. Some are more.
Very good. So they're
more
credible. You're
than
paying
others.
them a lot of money. You got a lot of them out there. So let me paint the picture for America. Hunter Biden joins Burisma in 2014. Burisma, very, very corrupt Ukrainian energy company. He has no experience in oil and gas. He admits it. He says, I don't have any experience. I know why I'm there. I have a dad. I have with me a document called the FD 1023. Have you seen this? You're
Yes,
familiar with it?
Yeah,
Okay,
I
it's
have
used by the FBI, everybody in America. It's used by the FBI. It is a confidential human source reporting document dated June 2020. You're familiar with it. In this document, the FBI's confidential human source says Burisma, now the corrupt company, needed to keep Hunter on the board so everything would be okay. And according to the human source, they hired Hunter Biden to, quote, protect us through his dad for all kinds of problems. Mr. Garland, does that concern you? Okay, it should. I got limited time. Remember, your sources are credible, trustworthy, honest, and valuable. Are you familiar with Victor Shokin?
The document that
Who is Mr. Victor Shokin? So I got 3 minutes left.
You want me to answer that?
Yeah, Victor Shokin. Who is he?
I don't know. Do you want me to
Okay,
answer
he's the
first question?
prosecutor, folks. He's the prosecutor that was, he oversees all the corruption in Ukraine. We know there's corruption over there. For the American people watching, after a few months after Hunter Biden joined the Burisma board, Victor Shokin was named Prosecutor General for Ukraine to target corruption. And one of his investigations was into Burisma. In this FD 1023 document, the human source clarified that Burisma's CEO, the man in charge of Burisma, said he has many text messages and recordings that show he was coerced to make such payment to ensure Victor Shokin was fired. Matter of fact, there was 17 of them. Mr. Garland, it's clear Joe Biden wanted Shokin fired so he would stop looking into Burisma, where Hunter was on the board. Would you agree? All right, let's let the American people decide. Play the clip. Play the clip.
I remember going over convincing our team or others to convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from
Pay attention, sir,
Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to the press conference. I said, no, I said, I'm not going to, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours. I looked, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid.
Mr. Attorney General, what you just saw there was Joe Biden in his arrogance and role as the vice president in this country saying if you don't fire Shokin, the United States isn't giving the $1 billion loan. Why would Joe Biden say that as the vice president? Why would he say such a thing? Was it policy? Was it our policy at the time? Yes or no? It wasn't. I have documents here. Interagency Policy Committee dated October
Point of information,
15th,
is the gentleman ever going to let the
I'm
gentleman
on my
answer
time,
question?
pipe down. Saying Shokin had made
Belongs to
significant
the gentleman
reforms.
from Texas.
He's made significant reforms. Shokin did. Matter of fact, John Kerry says he was impressive. And you know, within a few months after Shokin was fired, they appoint a prosecutor that said, we're not going to look into Burisma anymore. Cancel that. Forget it. We're not looking into Burisma. Boom. Here comes the $1 million. Joe Biden threatened the Ukrainian president and the prime minister. Everybody can see it, to fire Shokin, or the United States won't give the $1 billion. If that is not quid pro quo, sir, what is? I will tell you what it is, and America agrees with me. It's bribery, and it's impeachable. Are you going to do something about it? I bet you not, and that's why you, sir, also need to be impeached. I yield back.
Time of the gentleman has expired.
A very moving statement about your grandparents coming here from Belarus to live in the country without fear of prosecution. I grew up in very similar country, Ukraine now, and when I came here as a young person, I believed in the value as an American not to be afraid of my government. But I wanted to tell you, and I want to share with you and get your thoughts on that. Are you aware that a lot of Americans are now afraid of being prosecuted by your department? Are you aware about that? Are you aware of that? I'm just saying, are you aware or not?
I think that constant attacks on the department and saying
It's
that...
not attacks. Well, let me give you an example.
I don't know
We
what-
talk about January 6th. People.
Sorry?
Here, some people came on January 6th. There probably were some people that came on January 6th here, that had bad intent. But a lot of good Americans from my district came here because they're sick and tired of this government not serving them. They came with strollers and the kids, and there was chaotic situation because the proper security wasn't provided. That's a question that was answered really why. Why we debated for 45 minutes on the floor and didn't stop the debate after the people broke into the Capitol. But these people came, they were throwing the smoke bombs into the crowd with strollers with kids. People were showed up, FBI agent to people's houses. You had in my district, in my town, FBI phone numbers all over the district. Please call that. People are truly afraid. I just want to make sure if you're not aware that you are. And this is a big problem when people are afraid of their own government. And I'll share some other things. We're talking about justice system. I don't question, you're probably not a bad person. I don't know you, but I'll tell you, you're in charge of the department. And people right now feel, I look at Durham report and I call on the FISA violations of queries of millions of Americans, right? It's like KGB, but when I read Durham reports, we have this, you have a nice, playbook. First, let's have a special counsel, and then you don't have to answer any questions here. Then, let's extend slow walk investigation on Hillary Clinton, on Hunter, everything is slow walk. We were very quick on Donald Trump, but you were very slow walk. Then, by the time, that investigation and its statute of limitation expired, and all of your agents need to be tested for amnesia. No one recalls anything. Okay, you probably should have as part of your hiring policy. So no one held accountable, which was egregious what happened, in that report. When I read with them, I can't believe it happened in the United States of America. This is my frustration. I'll be honest with you. Then it's very interesting, regardless what it is, even people in Obama administration raise concerns. How can President sons be serving on, corrupt Ukrainian oligarchs? Do you understand that it actually can undermine the one Ukrainian effort and policy? I think these concerns were raised. The Obama administration didn't do anything about it. These people are dying right now, and Americans don't trust this president. So I want to ask you one thing. I don't need answer because I know you're not going to, but I think you're probably a good American and you care. And a lot of these people are so afraid they cover up this stuff, I think, in your department because they're embarrassed that what we became as a country, to say that what our Department of Justice became. That allows Russians to do propaganda in Chinese. It allows them to destabilize our country. That is danger to our republic. It is significant danger. And I have just one more question from you. I agree on corporate crimes and FISA stuff, even with Democrats, that we need to do a better job. One more question for you. Do you believe that, you talk about rights to vote, but do you believe that only U.S. citizens should be voting in this election and doing anything to make sure that only eligible people vote in elections?
Yes and yes.
Okay, I would like to see that, what you do. Thank you. Yield back.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina.
Mr. Attorney General, you're the only person who could ensure that Mr. Weiss had all the necessary authority, aren't you?
I'm the only person who can sign an agreement with respect to special counsel. The authority to do Section 515 can be signed by other people in the department.
You're aware, ultimately, though, the authority is yours.
Yes.
You made the point that you don't take orders from the president about such things. You decide, ultimately, what the Justice Department will do.
I announced at the beginning, I promised that he would be able to bring whatever cases he wants, and I have followed through on that promise. I'm permitted to make that kind of promise, and I have made it.
Did you undertake to inform yourself, to interact with him sufficient to ensure that he knew he possessed that authority, or that you would see to it that he had all necessary authority?
I don't think there's any doubt that he knew. He has written 3 letters to this committee indicating that he understood he had.
You're also aware, though, aren't you, sir, that a senior IRS investigator, whistleblower, came forward and has testified publicly that Mr. Weiss stated that he did not have such authority. He was not the decider. Are you aware of that?
I'm aware of the testimony. I was not present at any point during that statement. And Mr. Weiss, who was present, has indicated that he had the authority and he knew that he had it.
Subsequent to those developments, though, you decided to make Mr. Weiss special counsel, which you had not done before.
Mr. Weiss made clear he did not ask me to be special counsel until last month, and last month I made him special counsel.
Did you have some lack of information that you should have had that would have caused you to act earlier to make him special counsel?
Mr. Weiss did not ask to be special counsel before.
I understand he didn't ask. You said that, sir. Did you take the necessary steps to inform yourself what authority he understood he had or what obstacles he was encountering?
Look, Mr. Weiss had, as I said from the beginning, at the very beginning, that he had authority over all matters that pertain to Hunter Biden.
Have you learned that he was in fact deterred by decisions of the United States attorneys in the District of Columbia and the Northern District of California from proceeding as he thought best?
With respect, Congressman, Mr. Weiss has not said that he was deterred. He said that he followed the normal processes of the department, and that he was never denied the ability to bring a case in another jurisdiction.
Well, what changed then, Mr. Attorney General?
Because
what made you decide
I can't find a
that
lawyer.
sufficient
I don't know
legal
how to
situation he
sue government
was
abuse.
until you decided to make him special counsel?
Mr. Weiss asked for that authority, given the extraordinary circumstances of this matter, and given my promise that I would give him any resources he requested, I made him special counsel.
So until that time, was it just a matter of his predilection, or did you undertake to investigate and discern what he was doing with his authority and whether he faced any obstacles?
I did not endeavor to investigate because I had promised that I would not interfere with this investigation. The way to not interfere is to not investigate an investigation.
Once he requested to be named special counsel, having not done so over months and months of your tenure, did you ask him what had changed that made him now need to be a special counsel?
Mr. Weiss asked to be made special counsel. I had promised that I would give him all the resources he needed, and I made him special counsel.
When did the Justice Department permit statutes of limitations to expire on some of the prospective charges against Hunter Biden for tax violation?
I don't know anything about the statute of limitations here. The investigation was in the hands of Mr. Weiss to make the determinations that he thought were appropriate.
Are you unaware that the statutes of limitations have in fact been allowed to expire after there having been tolling agreements in place?
I'm going to say again, determination of where to bring cases and which kinds of cases to bring was left to Mr. Weiss.
Yes, sir. I understand that you've said that. That's part of the problem. The question is, are you aware that statutes of limitations have been allowed to expire while the matter was under investigation?
The investigators were fully familiar with all the relevant law.
I'm not asking for the excuses. I'm asking whether you're aware of that fact, sir.
I'm going to say again. I'm going to say again and again if necessary. I did not interfere with, did not investigate, did not
See, those are statements in response to other questions. Everybody in the country now knows who's paying attention to this. The Justice Department permitted statutes of limitations to expire. Everyone who's ever practiced understands the implications of allowing statutes of limitations to expire. Do you not even know as you sit here whether that occurred or not?
Prosecutors make appropriate determinations on their own. In this case, I left it to Mr. Weiss whether to bring charges or not. That would include whether to let statute of limitations expire or not, whether there was sufficient evidence to bring a case.
Trump was still being attacked by
or not, whether there were better cases to bring or not.
Even now, 2024 February, match one.
I ask you about Mr. Scott Smith, father in Loudoun County, Virginia, who was arrested at a school board meeting where he questioned the rape of his daughter in a bathroom in the public school there. You said at the time you were unfamiliar with the case. Are you now? Yes or no?
Only familiar to the
lawyer
extent
keeps
I've read about it in
suing
the press.
Trump in court, trying to make Trump sell his expensive property in New York for business
to
gain
address violence and threats of violence
and
in
for
connection with
political
school
gain also.
personnel.
Directed at school boards.
Not directed at school boards, directed at school personnel, school administrators.
Throughout the country is a priority for the federal government, for the United States Attorney's Office. That followed a letter on September 29th, 2021 from the National School Board Association to President Biden and emails from the National School Board Association Director Chip Slavin to the White House in which the White House asked for specific threats. And one of the examples was Scott Smith. Subsequent to our hearing 2 years ago, 26 states left the National School Board Association and Slavin resigned on November 23rd of 2021. Last week, Mr. Smith was pardoned by Governor Youngkin. Do you think the governor was correct, yes or no?
Pardon authority belongs to the governor.
You don't have an opinion on whether the governor was correct?
I don't know the facts of the case, so I'm not in a position to make...
Have you rescinded the memo that you issued in 2021, yes or no?
What we're discussing...
Have you rescinded the memo, yes or no?
What we're discussing here occurred...
Does the memo still exist? Is it still going, yes or no? Has it been rescinded?
The memo was intended to have meetings within 30 days.
Has it been rescinded?
The 30 days have finished. Nothing has happened in more than a year and a half with respect to that
But it
memo.
has not been rescinded, it has not been
nothing
pulled back.
to rescind.
Despite evidence that has come out from the National School Board Association commissioned report that White House officials discussed this with DOJ more than a week before the letter was sent, the NSBA apologized. Have you apologized, yes or no?
I've testified 7 times since that original memo.
It's the first time you're back here since we talked about it.
I'm sorry?
It's the first time you're back here in front of us. Have you apologized for putting that memo out that implicated Scott Smith as a domestic terrorist, something the governor of Virginia has now pardoned him from all of these accusations?
Memo said nothing about him, nothing about parents being terrorists, nothing about attending school
So
boards.
the answer is it's not been rescinded and you haven't apologized for it.
Answer is that's not an-
labeling an American citizen a domestic terrorist in a memo and referring to it and a memo that's built on the back of that. But now we had this compliments being driven to the Civil Rights Division. Let's talk about Mark Houck in Pennsylvania, a father who was arrested with heavily armed federal and local law enforcement in front of his wife and children. This after Mark Houck's lawyers had said he would appear voluntarily. Local authorities investigated, found no case. Mark Houck was arrested by the FBI for FACE Act violations. The jury met for an hour. Houck was acquitted. Now, when I was in federal court, I don't remember that being my result very often. In fact, I don't remember happening at all, where we took it to a jury and it was acquitted after an hour. Did you investigate this or question the United States Attorney why they wasted resources for such an obvious result? And can you explain, yes or no, that was a good use of the Department of Justice's authority?
The Justice Department respects the jury's verdict. The decisions in that case were made by agents and prosecutors on the ground.
Are you concerned that enforcement of the FACE Act has been biased towards pro-lifers over anti-life protesters, 126-4 by our count? And we're asking information to be able to track down the information of such prosecutions, but 126 times against pro-lifers versus 4 times for people who dare to question the issue of life. So I'll leave that out there just to say that is the Civil Rights Division at play. Meanwhile, we've got the very liberal progressive groups being targeted as well. Senator Cruz and I sent a letter to you asking for information about how the FBI informant had gone to a liberal group's pro-life meeting, and yet we didn't get any response from you. So I'd ask if you would respond to our letter that we sent back in March asking about FBI infiltrating such a meeting.
I don't know what you're referring to, but I will ask the Office of Legislative Affairs to look into this letter.
Thank you. Finally, our tax cases require approval by Maine Justice no matter what district has venue, yes or no? Do tax cases as a general matter require approval by Maine Justice no matter what district has venue, yes or no?
It depends on the circumstances in the example that I know you're referring to.
Generally speaking, yes. Since Maine Justice runs tax division, yes or no? Maine Justice runs the tax division.
In the Hunter Biden case, I assured Mr. Weiss
That's not what I'm asking about. I didn't ask you. I haven't mentioned that guy's name. I didn't. I very simply asked a very simple question. Okay. Do tax cases require approval by Maine Justice? As a general matter?
Most of the time, but not when the Attorney General has granted authority to a U.S. Attorney to do what he thinks is best.
And in a turf battle, the tax division...
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
I mean, I recall my colleague in Texas having a minute and a half of additional time.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Good day, Mr. Attorney General, and this may be the reason that it's good for you to leave the Chief Justice and that group before each of us speak, because you would have already heard all that. I want to thank you personally for your office and your engagement on Camp Lejeune and on obviously a vast amount of litigation. That is one of the many, many jobs that falls at your feet. One of the jobs that falls at our feet here is that we are watchdogs of the executive branch. You have previously said that you are not Congress's attorney, and you've said you're not the president's attorney. And I'm assuming that you're neither our prosecutor nor our defense attorney, and you are neither the president's prosecutor nor defense attorney. And that's why today's investigation really does deal with the fact that if you're not, by definition, the president's prosecutor, but we have an obligation to see whether or not the president or a member of his family or in concert with the president's activities, in fact, need to be overseen, admonished, or even prosecuted. And so I have a couple of questions for you, and one of them is that you have not said this very much today, but you often say, I cannot comment on that because it's an ongoing investigation. And when we ask for information, you very commonly say that it is the policy, not the law, but the policy of the Department of Justice not to provide information related to an ongoing investigation. So far, I'm on track. Is that correct?
I think I've said more than that's just a policy. I think the letters we've sent trace it to the constitutional separation of powers, to Rule 6E of the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure, et cetera. But in general, I'm in accord with what you're saying.
So one of the challenges we face is that just a matter of weeks ago, a federal judge found the actions of now special prosecutor to be so outside what he could agree to that he pushed back on a plea settlement and nullified it and sent the U.S. attorney going back. In light of that, don't you think it's appropriate for that portion to be considered a pre-ongoing investigation, and for Congress to legitimately look at the activities leading up to that failed plea bargain, rather than wait until weeks, months, or years from now a case is fully settled?
So if you'll give me a chance, first, I don't agree with the characterization of what happened in the plea. The district judge performed her obligations under Rule 11 to determine whether the parties were in agreement as to what each had agreed to, and determined that they were not. He fell apart, as you know. There's been another prosecution, so that leads to the second thing. We are in, Mr. Weiss is in the midst of an ongoing prosecution on the very matter that you're talking about.
Okay, but Mr. Attorney General, if we believe, and we do, at least on this side of the dais, that a pattern of behavior is occurring relative to the investigation of Hunter Biden, particularly and including, well, he lived in the vice president's home, well, he operated commingled with the vice president, and even today as he travels with the president. So in light of that, can you agree that in fact it should be reasonable for us to look at a number of items, including, and one that I want your answer on, and I know we have limited time. Mr. Weiss supposedly had this ability to bring a prosecution anywhere. He now explicitly has that ability. However, are you concerned, and should we have the right to look into the fact that political appointees in California and in the District of Columbia refused to, in fact, cooperate with him in those investigation that he was charged with doing in Delaware, but which flowed over into their jurisdiction? Isn't that, in fact, an example where those political appointees of the now president, that their decision not to cooperate with him creates at least an appearance of political interference with the investigation of the president's son and possibly activities related to the president?
I'm happy to answer this question in hypothetical, but not in the specifics, because I have stayed out of this matter. In the hypothetical, it is the normal process of the department that if a U.S. attorney in one district wants to bring a case in another, they go to that other district and consult. It's perfectly appropriate. They do that in order to determine what the policies are in that district, what the practices have been in that district, what the judges are like in that district. But a U.S. attorney in another district does not have the authority to deny another U.S. attorney the ability to go forward. And I have assured Mr. Weiss that he would have the authority one way or the other. And I think Mr. Weiss's letters completely reflect that.
Thank you. To be continued.
Time of the gentleman has expired. Recognized for 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney General.
Thank you.
On August 11th, 2023, you appointed Mr. Weiss special counsel. You wrote a letter to the House and Senate Judiciary Committees where you cited extraordinary circumstances requiring the appointment. You avoided answering the question when Mr. Bentz asked you. I'll give you another chance to answer it. What were those extraordinary circumstances?
I'm afraid I'll have to give you the same answer I gave before. I've gave as much as I can give, which is that he thought that he had reached a stage where it would be appropriate. That I had promised him that I would give him any resource that he needed, and that he asked for it. And to go further would go into a pending investigation.
Okay, let's talk about that authority. Back on March 1st, you told the Senate Judiciary Committee that Mr. Weiss had the full authority to bring cases in other jurisdictions if he felt it was necessary. On June 7th, Mr. Weiss wrote to the Judiciary Committee stating he had been granted ultimate authority over the matter, including responsibility for deciding where, when, and whether to file charges. But by June 30th, he had changed his tune and said that his charging authority was geographically limited, and And it would be up to the U.S. Attorney's Office and then
Ma-
you to determine
Mary,
whether he can partner on the case, and if not, he can request special attorney status from the AG pursuant to 28 U.S.C. 515. And he had been assured that if necessary, he would be granted 515 authority in D.C., Central District of California, or any other district where charges could be brought. Let me ask you, is there some distinct legal authority known as special attorney status?
I'm sorry?
Is there some distinct legal authority known as special attorney status?
Yeah, Section 515 permits the Attorney General to sign an order to authorize a prosecutor to work in another district.
And if you had already decided that he had full authority, why did you feel it was necessary to sign that document?
I'm sorry?
Why did Mr. Weiss feel that he would need that extra authority if you had conveyed to him that he would have all that authority?
You'll have to speak with Mr. Weiss about that. I think his three letters are quite clear that he understood he would have the necessary authority and that no U.S. attorney could block him.
Okay. We asked you earlier about his request for this authority, and we need to know who he spoke to about this authority and when. Before he asked you in August, he had discussions about this with others at the department. Who did he discuss special counsel authority with, and when did he do that?
I'm not going to discuss internal deliberations of the department. I guaranteed that Mr. Weiss would have the authority that he needed, and the moment he asked for the authority, I gave it to him.
Did he discuss it with the Deputy Attorney General?
Again, I'm not going to get into discussions of deliberations within the Justice Department.
That is not a valid constitutional objection.
Well, that is a valid constitutional deliberation. It has to constitutional objection. It has to do with the ability of the Justice Department to do its communications, just as your deliberations with your staff and other members are protected by the Constitution.
Detailing who had conversations and when does not implicate the internal deliberations at the department. The substance of those deliberations, simply detailing who and when, does not implicate those.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into the internal discussions of the department or who talked to who about what. Mr. Weiss has told this committee that he well understood his ability to bring a case wherever he wanted, and I have said that he had that ability.
Do you think that the extraordinary circumstances that you cited in the appointment have anything to do with the June 22nd and July 19th testimony of whistleblowers, Special Agents Shapley and Ziegler?
I don't think it has anything to do with Mr. Shapley, no.
Do you believe Christopher Wray is a competent director of the FBI?
I think Mr. Wray is a person of the highest integrity, for whom I have great admiration, who has extraordinary experience, both as...
Thank you. You certainly don't think he would knowingly give false testimony to this committee, do you?
I'm sure that he would not.
Are you aware that Director Wray a couple months ago in sworn testimony implicated you in a sweeping abuse of power?
I doubt he would characterize whatever he said in that way.
Well, he testified about the school board memo that you issued on October 4th of 2021, in which you mobilized federal law enforcement powers against American parents. Now, of course, you didn't put it quite like that. Instead, you found a pretext, which is stated right here in the first line of the memo. In recent months, there has been a disturbing spike in harassment, intimidation, and threats of violence against school administrators, board members, teachers, and staff. What was your basis for making that claim?
I will say again, as I've testified numerous times in response to exactly the same question, that I saw numerous reports in the press of violence and threats.
You saw reports in the press, and so you decided to instigate a nationwide law enforcement initiative?
If I may be permitted to answer the question.
Please.
Numerous reports in the media of violence and threats of violence against school personnel of all kinds.
Did you consult with the FBI director?
We received a letter from the National Association of School Boards reporting.
Yes, that letter contained anecdotes. It didn't contain data of an increase. Did you, yes or no, consult with the FBI director before issuing the memo?
I don't believe I spoke with the FBI director, no.
Why not? Why wouldn't you consult with the FBI director?
Because the purpose of the memo as is very clear from the memo, is to ask the FBI to assess the situation, to hold meetings, and to determine whether this.
Mr. Attorney General, you started with a conclusion that there was an increase in threats. Now, if you had bothered to consult with the FBI director, here's what he would have said. This is from his sworn testimony, that he was not aware of any such evidence. So my question for you, sir, sitting here today, is can you substantiate your claim that there was an increase? Of course, there will always be sporadic criminal activity in all quarters of society. But your claim was there was an
I'm
increase. Can you
watching
substantiate
Democrat Party's false news right now. In computer, not in TV. TV reporting is
That's a no. You're giving us anecdotes.
real
I'm
stuff.
asking you if you have data. You also said in your memo that you were committed to using the department's authority and resources to discourage these threats, identify them when they occur, and prosecute them when appropriate. Were there any such prosecutions?
The emphasis should be there on when appropriate, and there were no such prosecutions, and that's good news, not bad news.
There were no prosecutions, and in fact, Rex Rice said there were no arrests, there were no charges. So you have no data to show us that there was any increase. You didn't even bother to consult with the FBI director, and then there were no resulting prosecutions, even though you said that they were coming. So I have to ask you now, in retrospect, was there a compelling law enforcement justification for the memo?
I think you're mischaracterizing the memo. The purpose of the memo was to hold meetings, to open lines of communication with states.
So is that a no? Yes or no? Was there a compelling law enforcement justification?
I believe there was a reason to ask for those contacts to be made with state and local law enforcement.
Well, the FBI director disagrees with you. When I asked
That's not what the FBI director
look
said.
at it right here, Mr. Attorney General. When asked, do you have any reason to dispute the conclusion that there was no nationwide law enforcement justification?
I haven't lost
He said he
yet.
didn't.
I still have a chance.
Either he didn't see the reports, or he didn't see the national.
This is a transcript. I've sent you this transcript, Mr. Attorney General. So my question is this. Will you retract the memo, and by that I mean issue a formal document to the effect that it is no
This is
longer
an
wrong?
outrage. I
I will
demand
not, because there was
satisfaction.
absolutely nothing wrong with the memo, as I have testified several times over.
Even though your own FBI director says there is no justification for it, you will not retract it.
The memo is mine, it's my decision whether it's necessary to make assessments like this, and I asked the Bureau to make these assessments, and the
Are you
other,
familiar with the concept of a chilling effect?
I'm sorry,
Are you familiar with the concept of a chilling effect?
I'm very familiar, and that's the very
How
reason.
would you define a chilling effect as it relates to First Amendment?
That's the very reason.
Yeah, this is Biden. That is false
What
news.
you consider to be the definition.
No, it doesn't look like Trump.
That memo has no chilling effect.
I didn't ask you your opinion on whether the memo has one. I asked you what is a chilling effect.
I'm telling you that the second sentence of that makes clear.
I've read the full memo. I'm asking you, what do you define a chilling effect as?
Next question is from
The chilling effect is when people's exercise of First Amendment rights are chilled by coercive activity by the government, which did not occur.
So here we're dealing with bombs and
Mr.
bags.
Chairman,
You and I
point of order with respect to the time. Point of order.
The gentleman's time has expired, but it was a pretty darn important question when the Attorney General of the United States can't define what a chilling effect is, so I thought I would let it go a few seconds.
The Attorney General did define what a chilling effect is and said it didn't occur here.
I don't think he defined it, he just dismissed it. The gentleman's time has expired. I thought it was a very important 5 minutes. We now will move to 5-minute questions, and we will start with the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. Mr. Weiss, the rule of law does distinguish our country, but you have not upheld that. You have allowed the rule of law to erode, and that's why 65% of the people in this country have no faith in the Department of Justice under your leadership. They don't trust it. They don't trust you. The reason is because they're witnessing every day a politicized Justice Department and a two-tiered system of justice. For example, they see the DOJ, of course, aggressively prosecuting President Biden's chief political rival, Mr. Trump, while at the same time, they see slow walking and special treatment given to the president's son. That's just a fact that everybody can see with their own two eyes. I want to focus on that investigation of the Biden family. We have many important questions for you today about that. Let me just get right to the chase. Has anyone from the White House provided direction at any time to you personally or to any senior officials at the DOJ regarding how the Hunter Biden investigation was to be carried out?
No.
Have you had personal contact with anyone at FBI headquarters about the Hunter Biden investigation?
I don't recollect the answer to that question, but the FBI works for the Justice Department. It's,
I'm sorry. You don't recollect whether you've talked with anybody at FBI headquarters about an investigation of the president's son?
I don't believe that I did. I promised the Senate when I came before it for confirmation that I would leave Mr. Weiss in place and that I would
I
not
already heard you
interfere
say
with his
you don't
investigation.
remember
Okay,
something
you never-
for at least 10 times.
All right. Have you had personal contact with anybody at the Baltimore field office on the Hunter Biden matter? On July 10, 2023, U.S. Attorney David Weiss told Senator Lindsey Graham, quote, I had discussions with departmental officials regarding potential appointment under 28 U.S.C. Section 515, which would have allowed me to file charges in a district outside my own without the partnership of the local U.S. attorney, end quote. With whom did Mr. Weiss have those discussions?
I'm not going to get into the internal deliberations of the department.
Oh, but you must, sir. This is important for us. We have oversight responsibility over your department, and we need these answers.
It's appropriate and necessary for Mr. Weiss to have conversations with the department. I made clear that if he wanted to bring a case in any jurisdiction, he would be able to do that. The way you do that is to get an order signed by the Attorney General called a 515 order. I promised he would be able to do that, and he in his letters made clear he understood he would be able to do that.
Okay, can you tell us about any briefings or discussions that you personally have had with Mr. Weiss regarding any and all federal investigations of Hunter Biden?
I'm going to say again, I promised the Senate that I would not interfere with Mr. Weiss.
So you have not, no, I'm just, under oath today, your testimony is, you have not had any discussions with Mr. Weiss about this matter?
Under oath, my testimony today is that I promised the Senate I would not intrude in his investigation. I do not intend to discuss the internal Justice Department deliberations, whether or not I had them.
Oh, okay, so your testimony today is you're not going to tell us whether you've had discussions with Mr. Weiss?
My testimony today is I told the committee that I would not interfere. I made clear that Mr. Weiss would have the authority to bring cases that he thought were appropriate.
Okay.
Mr. Weiss's
All right.
letter.
Okay, let me stop. For sake of time, sir, are you aware that FBI officials have come before this committee and they have stated that there was a cumbersome bureaucratic process that Mr. Weiss had to go through to bring charges in another judicial district? You know that?
I'm not aware, but that's not true. There's nothing cumbersome about the process.
So those whistleblowers are lying to us under oath? Those whistleblowers are lying?
You say that. Their description of the process is cumbersome.
是左眼警察他们
It's not a
说
fact
请让我看
question.
看
All I have to do is
Okay,
sign a
all right,
section.
let me get to the facts.
Tell me
Mr.
to
Weiss
sign
has been the lead
it.
prosecutor on the Hunter Biden case since 2018, correct?
I'm sorry?
Mr. Weiss has been the lead prosecutor on the Hunter Biden case since 2018. Now, here's the question.
He's been the lead prosecutor since he was appointed by President Trump.
Okay, why, let me ask you, why has the Justice Department dragged this investigation out for so long? Does it really take years to determine if Hunter Biden lied on a federal form related to purchasing a firearm?
Mr. Weiss was a long-time career prosecutor. President Trump appointed him as the...
You're not answering the question. Is that standard procedure? Should it take that long to make such a simple determination?
I'm answering the question. Give me an opportunity to do so.
Okay.
He was charged with that investigation under the previous administration. He's continued. He knows how to conduct investigations, and I have not intruded or attempted to evaluate that because that was the promise I made to the Senate.
The whistleblowers gave us testimony about serious misconduct of the Justice Department in regards to the preferential treatment afforded Hunter Biden. Has your office requested an investigation into that?
There are well-known processes for how whistleblowers make their claims. I am a strong proponent of whistleblowers and a strong defender. We have an Inspector General's office. We have an Office of Professional Responsibility. That is the way in which complaints from whistleblowers should be and are appropriately handled.
I'm out of time again.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes a gentlelady from Wyoming. Ms. Hagan.
We have been investigating very serious charges made about your department and other elements of the Biden administration, which allege ignoring the law to protect political allies from being held accountable for their wrongdoing. One aspect of this allegation, brought by two very credible whistleblowers from the IRS, demonstrates a strategy of delaying criminal investigation into Hunter Biden and blocking any investigations into the corruption of Joe Biden. The whistleblower testimony notes that U.S. Attorney David Weiss in November 2022 allowed the statute of limitations to expire
even though Hunter Biden's attorney had already agreed to extend the statute on the 2014 and 2015 charges, which charges included an attempt to evade or defeat taxes and the fraud and false statements related to the $1 million that Burisma paid to Hunter Biden while his father was vice president. During a recent transcribed interview with the committee, FBI officials from the Baltimore field office refused to answer questions about the expired 2014 and 2015 tax charges because they were allegedly part of a, quote, ongoing investigation. Are the tax charges related to these years in fact part of an ongoing investigation?
Again, I have no familiarity with the details of this particular investigation.
So you don't know one way or the other?
That's right, I left it up to Mr.
So how are charges for which the statute of limitations have already expired part of an ongoing investigation?
Again, I don't know anything about this case.
So why would charges that have already expired because of the statute of limitations be part of an ongoing investigation?
Answering the hypothetical, because I don't know the facts, often charges from previous times are used as part of an ongoing investigation to inform information about intent, about patterns and practices.
Other investigations? So are there other investigations into Hunter Biden where this information may become relevant?
I think it's a matter of public record that there is a tax investigation of Mr. Hunter Biden with respect to other years.
Beyond the 2014 and 2015?
Beyond the ones that are that you're referring to, I think.
And Mr. Garland?
Weiss has already said that during the plea proceeding.
Okay, Mr. Garland, is it standard operating procedure in your Department of Justice for prosecutors to allow the statute of limitations to expire on very serious crimes when the potential defendant has already agreed to an extension?
So there, as I said before, there's no standard operating procedure here.
Maybe there should be. This is an oversight hearing, maybe there should be. Maybe you should adopt standard operating procedures to avoid this kind of a circumstance. Would you agree?
No,
Okay.
because it's left
According
to
to
the
one of the
discretion
IRS,
of.
you've answered my question, thank you. According to one of the IRS whistleblowers, quote, the purposeful exclusion of the 2014 and 2015 tax years sanitized the most substantive criminal conduct and concealed material facts, end quote. How can Americans trust an investigation run by a special counsel who, by allowing the statute of limitations to expire, irreversibly, quote, sanitized the most substantive criminal conduct and concealed material facts?
The prosecutor in question is an experienced veteran career prosecutor who was appointed by
And we have no reason to trust him, do we?
by President Trump.
Okay. How much in terms of taxes would Hunter Biden have owed on the $1 million he was paid by Burisma?
As you can imagine, since I don't know anything about the facts of the case, I can't answer
Probably
your
about
question.
$400,000. Isn't that right? I mean, you can do the math. You know the tax code.
I don't know anything about the facts of this case, so I'm not able to do the math to apply it to
And by
facts I
failing
don't
to pay
know.
the taxes on those ill-gotten gains, what would the typical penalty have been, for example, if it was someone who didn't have the last name of Biden or a D behind their name?
I'm sorry, these are all questions you'll have to direct to Mr. Weiss, and that Mr. Weiss will address in his final.
By allowing the statute of limitations to lapse, did Mr. Weiss effectively gift the tax money Hunter Biden owed for the 2014 and 2015 tax years to Mr. Biden?
To say again, the decisions about whether in this area and whether these allegations are correct are ones that Mr. Weiss will be able to answer.
Mr. Garland, one of the things you have done over and repeated over and over and over again is that to point out that Mr. Weiss was appointed as U.S. Attorney by President Trump, as though that somehow inoculates him from criticism by us. Is that really how this game is played? That if someone is appointed by a Republican, then they're supposed to be on the Republican team? Or if they're appointed by a Democrat, they're on the Democrat team? You were appointed by Mr. Biden, weren't you? Are you on the Democrat team?
Let me just be clear. That he was appointed by a Republican counteracts the claim that this was a partisan decision to benefit Democrats.
He remained as a member of the Department of Justice.
Mr. Chairman.
I'm Mr. Chairman. The gentlelady has expired. It's back. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome, Attorney General. You know, following your confirmation, Americans were promised they were getting a focused, nonpartisan to lead their federal law enforcement. I had my doubts back then. And the last 2 years have more than confirmed in my mind those fears. Never in my life would I have thought that I would see such a politicized DOJ. Never in my life would I have thought I would see such a Department of Justice that didn't obey their own rules. Never in my life did I think I would see the egregious investigations conducted under your watch, or the blatant disregard of the First Amendment by FBI field officers under your watch. And never in my life did I think I would see our great DOJ turn into a politicized weapon to be wielded by an investigation to attack political rivals. I still hold the thousands of hardworking staff with high regard, but unfortunately there are some within the department, in my mind, who have betrayed their oaths. And for that, you must be held accountable. I hold you accountable for the labeling of parents as domestic terrorists standing up for their proper education of their own children. I hold you accountable for the anti-Catholic memo. Imagine sending agents undercover into Roman Catholic churches because they were supposedly domestic terrorists. And I hold you accountable for unleashing a special counsel with a history of botched investigations on our current president's political rival. The department under your leadership, I am sorry to say, has become an enforcement arm of the Democratic National Committee. If there is a perceived threat to the Democratic Party, this DOJ attacks every single time. But when there are actionable threats against conservatives, this DOJ stays put. Violent protesters outside the Supreme Court Justice's home, unpunished. Attacks on pro-life centers, unpunished. The two-tiered system of justice is clear, and it's clear to the American public. And the buck stops with the man in charge. That man is you. The actions of the DOJ are on you. The decline of Americans' trust in our federal law enforcement is on you. The political weaponization of the DOJ is on you. Attorney General, I need a simple yes or no to the following. Just yes or no, because we don't have much time. Do you agree that traditional Catholics are violent extremists? Yes or no?
To answer what you've said in that long list of
I'll
be happy to answer all of those.
Attorney General, I control the time. I'm going to ask you to answer the questions I asked.
You control time by asking me a substantial number of things. And
I didn't ask you those things. I made a statement. Attorney General, through the chair, I ask you, do you agree that traditional Catholics are violent extremists?
I have no idea what the traditional means here. The idea, let me just
go to church.
May I answer the question?
Yes,
the idea that someone with my family background would discriminate against any religion is so outrageous, so absurd.
Mr. Attorney General, it was your FBI that did this. It was your FBI that was sending, and we have the memos, we have the emails, we're sending undercover agents into Catholic churches.
Both I and the director of the FBI have said that we were appalled by that memo.
So then you agree that they're not extremists?
We were appalled by that memo.
Are they extremists or not, Attorney General?
I think that...
Are they extremists or not, Attorney General?
Everything in that memo is
Are they extremists or not? I'm asking a simple question. Say no if you think that was wrong.
Catholics are not extremists. No.
Was anyone fired for drafting and circulating the anti-Catholic memo?
You have in front of you the inspection division's investigation.
Just tell me yes or no, please.
I don't know.
We have no time.
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. Do you agree that parents attending school board meetings should be categorized? Should parents that go to school board meetings and are very vocal about their kids' education, should they be classified as domestic terrorists?
Of course not. And my memo made clear that vigorous objections to policies in schools are protected by the First Amendment.
The president this week accused you, not the president himself, his staff, and it was in the Wall Street Journal, and it was leaked out, of mismanaging the Hunter Biden probe. Do you agree? Yes or no? It was in the Wall Street Journal article. I'm not saying that.
Do I agree with the Wall Street Journal?
Yes. And that the information they released, it said you botched this probe.
I think I've dealt with the Biden investigation.
Appreciate it. The gentleman yields back.
然后骗那些无知的美国百姓说这个是真的是川普在看希拉里。
Jack Smith was deeply involved in the IRS scandal that targeted conservative political groups to harass. His malicious prosecution of former Governor McDonnell was unanimously overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court Chief Justice Roberts, who accused Smith directly for attempting to criminalize political activity. You appointed him to prosecute Joe Biden's chief rival for the presidency. And then we have the appointment of David Weiss. Weiss deliberately allowed the statute of limitations to run out on any charges that could have implicated Joe Biden in influence peddling. He originally offered Hunter Biden a sweetheart deal that was ultimately upended by the court. And he's the one you appointed to pursue the charges that could implicate Joe Biden. That leaves me to only two explanations, either corruption or incompetence. So which is it?
Those are the kind of questions that judges would rule out of order.
I'm sure you would. Which is
Look, I said before, and I will say again, Mr. Weiss was the Republican-appointed United States Attorney appointed by President Trump.
Do you at least see the obvious double standard applied in these two appointments?
Mr. Weiss was a Republican appointee. Mr. Smith is not registered to either party. His entire career was as a career prosecutor.
I'm not asking what their party registrations are. I'm asking about their records and how those records would commend them to the appointments that you made. This is a question of judgment and it's a question of motive. What was motivating you to do this?
Mr. Smith had a nationwide reputation for integrity and for appropriate prosecution. His work can be measured by what he actually has filed. Everyone in the country can see the indictment.
How can you say that after he was so heavily implicated in the IRS scandal or the rebuke that the Supreme Court gave and many other examples? Let me go on. We've had two IRS whistleblowers inform Congress of attempts by senior Justice Department officials to obstruct a criminal investigation into millions of dollars of ill-gotten and undeclared income to Hunter Biden. They noted several deviations by department officials from normal process that provided preferential treatment, in this case to Hunter Biden, a direct quote, including allowing the statute of limitations to lapse, requesting IRS and FBI management level investigative communications, prohibiting investigators from referring to the big guy or dad in witness interviews, excluding the investigative team from meetings with defense counsel, and notifying defense counsel of pending search warrants. The U.S. Attorney's Office even tipped off the Bidens of an impending search of a storage unit where their records were being kept. Now that sounds an awful lot like obstruction of justice to me. Was that coming from you or from somebody else?
I'm sorry, I don't understand. Was that coming from you? I don't understand the question.
All of the actions that your employees took to obstruct the investigation of Hunter Biden and the earnings that he made and the taxes he failed to declare, their source and ultimately who they were paid to.
I'm going to say again with respect to the Hunter Biden investigation that it has been and still is in the hands of Mr. Weiss, an appointee of President Trump. I don't know about all these allegations. Some of them appear to have been from the period when the Attorney General appointed by President Trump was still the Attorney General.
Do these charges trouble you at all?
Mr. Weiss will have an opportunity to explain the decisions.
Well, you're the guy in charge. Does this trouble you?
I have intentionally not involved myself in the facts of the case, not because I'm trying to get out of responsibility, but because I'm trying to pursue my responsibility.
Your FBI director testified before this committee of an uptick in, quote, known or suspected terrorists coming across the southern border. And he told us that the southern border represents a massive security threat. Those were his words, a massive security threat. Do you agree?
I'm perfectly happy to align myself with the director of the FBI.
Well, why is it then that we, senior administration, rescind the Trump-era orders that had secured that border? We've seen an exponential increase in suspected terrorists.
Time of the gentleman's expired. The witness can respond. He chooses.
This is the answer to this question about immigration law is an extremely long answer. I would defer to the Department of Homeland Security, which is responsible for the physical security and about first contact at the border.
Well, we've tried to get answers from him, and he doesn't give them to us, so we're hoping you would. I understand, Mr. Attorney General, you've requested a short break, so we'll take a short break and resume in 5 minutes.
Okay, sorry.
It's the dawn of the 20th century, and America is changing in ways never thought possible. Drink fuels a criminal underworld. Millions cross the nation to escape poverty. Violence erupts. America is about to become the richest nation on earth. But none of it will happen without the discovery of what lies beneath the Texas dirt. Oil. Oil will power the 20th century and build the modern world. Some call it black gold. Texas, a wide, open, wild territory, closer to the old American West than modern day. The Hamill brothers. Al, 24, ex-cattleman. Kurt, 28, ex-salesman. A new breed of pioneer on the American frontier. Oil men. Young, rugged, ambitious. Known as some of the best in the business.
In the beginning of oil, it was hardship. Everything was hard to do. We didn't know it. Only the surface of the ground.
Oil has just been discovered in Texas, but the wells are small. Prospectors have a hunch that this low hill, east of the city of Houston, signifies oil. What they don't know is that beneath their feet lie oil reserves worth more than $11 billion today. Nowhere in the world has anybody discovered this much oil before. The first prospectors to tap into these reserves will become rich beyond their wildest dreams. The field the Hamill brothers are hired to drill will become the stuff of legend. It is called Spindletop.
Until the late 1850s, oil had been really an annoyance to most people. And people would dig water wells, and if they happened to strike oil by accident, they'd curse their bad luck. But with the development of railroads and with the Industrial Revolution, for the first time, people began seeking oil.
Until recently, whale oil cornered the market. It was used in lamps to light homes and streets. But the whales have been hunted to near extinction. One discovery has saved them. Oil. Made from the remains of tiny organisms in the world's oceans, it's been down there for as long as 160 million years. Native Americans have used it as medicine. Then in 1854, scientists in Pennsylvania discover it can be used for lighting. There's no turning back. Coal still dominates industry, powering trains and factories, but it's dirty and less efficient. A ton of coal has roughly half the energy of a ton of oil. For the right rig in the right place, there are fortunes to be made.
Well, that is the American dream, is that this is a land of opportunity where anything is possible if you roll up your sleeves and get to it.
Prospectors have tried drilling at Spindletop before, but all previous wells here have come up empty. The land is great for farming, but terrible for drilling. Earlier wells hit hundreds of meters of sand and collapsed. The Hamels get $6.50 for every meter they drill, top dollar. And when investors pay top dollar, they expect results. Their contract pays them to 366 meters. If they don't hit oil by then, it's over, and no one gets rich.
That's good. That's good.
Right now, they're at 120 meters. Drilling for oil is dangerous work. 6,000 die in oil explosions every year. Most rigs are primitive tools, smashing through rock by pounding it with a heavy object on a cable. But this is sand. You can't smash your way through sand. The Hamels are gambling on revolutionary technology, a steam engine that drills a pipe through the ground. So far, it's been able to bore through over 150 meters of sand and bedrock with no collapsing. But at 180 meters, disaster strikes. The drill hits a pocket of explosive gas and water. The pressure forces gas back up through the pipe. They're lucky to survive.
I see a really strong parallel between the culture of prospecting and the culture of entrepreneurial endeavors. Do all your surveys, you plan it out, you think it's really great, you dig down and there's nothing there. It's really hard to predict.
Progress is slow. They're fighting for every meter. The sand is too fine even for their drill. The walls of the borehole are starting to collapse. Normally, these kinds of rigs pump water into the borehole to support its walls. But the sand is too fine, the water too thin. They need a thicker liquid. They're forced to improvise using only material they have on hand. Water, dirt,
blood.
and cows.
Oh, they use blood to dig
Call
oil.
in a small herd of cattle and turned them loose in a nearby water pit. The cattle stomped around and made lots of
不是放血，我以为是把油洒了，用，因为前面说到 water，
With mud holding up the walls of the borehole, they're back on track.